Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees. It is January 14th, 2014, at about 5:30 p.m. Mr. Burning, will you please start with roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Burning? Present. Mr. McFarland?
Present.
Mr. Honeywell?
Present.
All the trustees are present.
Next, this evening, we have Alex.
Want to do the pledge first?
We're going to do that, yeah. We have a special presentation this evening, but I'm going to ask Alex JEDZ, am I saying that right, Alex? To lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone can please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Alex, if you would stay up here for just a moment, and we will come down.
We really had a wonderful opportunity this evening to acknowledge again one of to acknowledge one of our great Eagle Scouts in Springfield Township. And tonight we are so honored to honor Alex JEDZ. And he is being recognized for the great outstanding achievements that he's provided to the community and the community service with the successful completion of his Eagle Scout Award. Now, as most of you know, we've talked about this before, it's a rare person that can climb that ladder and achieve his Eagle Scout. So I'd like him to kind of acknowledge and tell us one of the great things that you did, Alex, and I'm going to present this to you as well.
Springfield Township resident Alex JEDZ is a freshman, currently homeschooled, and is set to graduate in 2017. He is an active member of his church youth group, plays basketball, and has been involved in Scouts since 2010. During his time as a Scout, Alex has served as assistant patrol leader, troop instructor, and troop guide. He has earned 23 merit badges, including life-saving, emergency preparedness, wilderness survival, and environmental science. Scouting has also led him to volunteer in a number of community improvement projects, including landscaping projects for the Father's House Orphanage, Glenwood Gardens, and the Miami Bike Trail. Additionally, he volunteers with Upwards Basketball Organization. Alex recently completed all requirements for the rank of Eagle Scout on December 30th, 2013, and his project involved designing and building an entire photography set for Springfield Township's annual Winterfest event. In under 2 weeks' time, Alex expertly constructed a 5-foot-tall Santa chair, a 6-foot wooden tree, 2 reindeers, and 3 wooden gift boxes. The completion of this project not only provided a quality showstopper for Winterfest, it provided long-term savings for the Arts Enrichment Council. The set pieces were designed to be versatile and with slight modifications will be used for other events. The Arts Council will save an estimated $300 per year in set rentals from this new addition. Tonight, we sincerely thank and congratulate Alex JEDZ for his accomplishments.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, moving on with our agenda this evening. The first item we have is approval of minutes for a special meeting on December 2nd, 2013, a meeting on December 3rd, 2013, and our regular meeting on December 10th, 2013. And finally, we have some work session special meeting minutes from December 11th, 2013. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Seconded. Mr. Vernon?
Just out of clarification, Mr. Burning, you can't vote on those minutes if you want to preside over the meeting.
At that point, good point, Chris. I'll second the motion then, and it would just be
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Arnold?
aye.
Resolution carries.
Next, Mr. Burning, Dan Burning, do we have the fiscal officer's report?
Yes. Sorry, I'm taking notes here. I request a motion to approve receipts, warrants, payroll expenditures, updating current revenues, and reports for the period. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I just want everyone in the audience to know that all financial reports are available at the administration offices weekdays during regular business hours. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burning. Next, we'll move on to departmental action and discussion items. Mr. Hennenkamp, you have a report for us.
I do, Mr. Harnwell. Just a few action items. The first is seeking the board's authorization to enter into our canine agreement. This is with our agreement for off-duty dog care for a canine officer. Chief, I don't believe there's any change to this contract. It's been in the past, we just have one canine officer now. So just seeking the board's authorization to enter into that agreement again. It's the same as what we've had in the past years.
Do we have a motion to enter into the canine contract as stated?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Burning? Aye. Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Arnold?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next item I have is the authorization, I guess, to review by the board of 3 different liquor permits, and I'm probably going to butcher these names. The first is SA LLC, doing business as Finneytown Drive-Through. I think these are all transfers to Enati Alpha Del at 944 West North Bend Road. The second is a transfer from Thomas and King Incorporated, doing business as Applebee's Neighborhood, to RMH Franchise Corporation, also doing business as Applebee Neighborhood Grill and Bar. And then the third one is a transfer from Halagi Corporation, doing business as Lefty's Edgemont Tavern, to Lake Island Sports Bar, LLC, doing business under that same name. And I do not believe, Chief, there's any objections to transfer of any of these draws. So at this point, Sean will just request that the board allow us to be customary and have this forwarded as such.
Do we have a motion to send the appropriate correspondence to the Ohio Division of Liquor Control?
So moved.
Seconded. Mr. Burning? Aye. Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Arnold?
Aye.
Motion carries. Is that for all 3 of them, or do we get them separately?
All
All together?
The next item I have is just two associations that the township has had membership in, and our membership is due, and just need authorization from the board to continue that membership. The first is to the Hamilton County, it's through the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission to remain a member of what is known as a planning partnership. We've been a member during the early years, we're not for some number of years, and then we joined again, and there's certain advantages that we gain. The membership is based on size of your community and population. It's about $4,965. At this point, I think given our utilization of the partnership, we would recommend renewal of that membership as well. And I think a lot of what we use them for, as we've discussed, is some of the mapping capabilities. We also have a variety of different training opportunities that are made available. We do some sort of regional planning as well. But mostly it's some of the GIS and mapping capabilities. So at this point, we would recommend renewing our membership with the Hamilton County Planning Partnership.
You know, Mike, I think this is one of those examples of things that we've done here at the township to try to, pool resources with other governmental entities to be able to provide better services, better tools for our community that would be very expensive if we had to try and do them on our own. Do we have a motion to approve the membership in the planning partnership?
I just also wanted to add that, the planning partnership, on top of what you all said, is an investment for all of us, and it doesn't cost us that much to stay aware from what's happening in not only locally, but at the state level as well when it comes to GIS systems, and also planning as you move your township or your municipality forward. So I'd like to make that motion.
I second it.
Mr. Vernon.
Aye.
Ms. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Honolo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Similarly, we also have the annual membership invoicing for an organization known as First Suburb, the First Suburbs Consortium. We have been a long-standing member of this organization as well. This group is sort of particular towards First Suburbs, of course, which we are. Tries to work on issues that are pertinent and has a similar role, but maybe a little bit more specific in the planning partnership. Is also kind of managed a little bit by regional planning, or sort of administered, I would say, not directly, but they use some of their staff. Membership in this organization is significantly less. It's $200 annually. Although we haven't been heavily involved, I think again, it's coming together for communities that have the same types of issues and good discussion and work together to try to do things that are sort of common purpose, same types of things. So again, we would recommend our continued participation in the First Suburbs Consortium.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Vernon.
Aye.
Ms. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Honolo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And the last action item I have for the board is to request that the board add the Stasi Restaurant and Banquet Center to our approved caterer list for the Grove. And that's something we do, on an ongoing basis when there's another caterer that would like to be able to provide service back at our facility. We just need a motion to add them to our approved caterer list.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Vernon.
Aye.
Ms. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Honolo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, under discussion, we're going to kind of turn to our law director, Laura, and Chief Hunter, touch on this issue a little bit. I know the board is well versed and familiar with our long-standing issues with a particular establishment in the Pleasant Run Farms area of the township. This is a nightclub called Chasers. It's been known by many different names, and we've had lots and lots of issues, police-related, liquor violation-related issues. And they had their liquor permit hearing recently, or still coming up? That was Wednesday, okay, so I just maybe ask you guys to bring us up to date on that hearing and where we stand.
We had a hearing in Columbus on violations that we filed, on the liquor control agency filed. Basically, we're awaiting a decision of the liquor board. We obviously asked for intentions or for permit revocation. And waiting for the liquor board to make the decision. They heard most of the evidence was stipulated to the charges. There was a number of outstanding charges. And Ohio Liquor Board issued a report about 3 to 4 weeks after the hearing. So hopefully by this time next month, we'll know what the decision was for that permit terms.
Thank you, Chief. Hopefully they'll make the right decision.
We hope so.
Well, hopefully they'll make it right for our community, to keep our community safe, as well as those residents that live in that particular area, because it's really a hot spot. And, we are so fortunate that not one of our officers or anyone else has been physically harmed, because I understand that there have been weapons in that place as well, and
Yeah,
they confiscated that.
There have been a number of firearms, drug violations, health board violations, all violations that they heard. So, in their hands, and whatever decision they think is appropriate.
That's a lot, I never heard of that.
There's a lot.
I guess it could be, but
Well, as a board may recall, I mean, under, I don't know if it was probably not under Chasers, but I think either under a different name, it might have had some common ownership. We had one of our officers actually shot at.
Exactly.
Close range, and then just the amount of, I guess, impact to other businesses on Friday evenings where you've had shut down Hamilton Avenue, and even businesses, some that are not in the township, that are adjoining Corning Township, had to close because of the impact and the spill over the crowd. And, I don't know, what's the capacity? I know it's changed because they sort of changed it. At one time, it was, you got 3 and 4 times the amount of people trying to get into a club that can only accommodate, and so those folks have nowhere to go, and they order, and all kinds of different issues.
Parking violations.
It's been, how long, off and on, maybe 3, 4 years?
They've been cited under the same ownership, but it's changed the name of the club and, operating managers, but it's been going on for about 3 years. It's been there longer than that. We had issues with opposite with the last 3, and where it was just, constantly. Up until a couple months ago, we have 4 officers working up there every Friday and Saturday. Because of the crowd, the crowd that brought in and the issues that came in there.
Well, the only thing is, it's died down now because it's cold, but wait till the weather starts getting warmer.
No, they've got a history of, after the cited for a number of violations, they stay on for a month or so. Once the liquor hearings are over, once, they serve their suspensions or whatever, then it starts up again, so. We'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on it and try to keep it under control.
Well, Chief, we appreciate everything you're doing to try to get that situation under control. And this past week, I received an email from a citizen stating that Springfield Township was recognized as one of the safest communities in Ohio. And I don't have that report with me, but do you know about that, Chief?
I saw the copies of the article. Kim knows more about it than I do.
Kim, do you know about it? I don't have it with me.
There's a company, it's safewise.com, that puts out the report annually for each state of the 50 most safe cities in that state, and Springfield Township was listed as number 34. So it's based on 2011 FBI reports.
All right, good job.
I think that kind of coincides with, we started the neighborhood master plan, and we began to go out to each of the different neighborhoods. And we kind of remember how we talked about statistics that were before that. We had police department sort of try to break down where the crime stats in your particular neighborhood, where you're from, how does that compare against the rest of the township, and then how does the township compare against areas in our particular immediate area or kind of tri-state region. And I think that, if you remember, most people were sort of shocked because they had a different perception of crime than what actually it was. And there's communities that have better maybe reputation where people think, well, it's safe, and their crime rate's 3 and 4 times higher than ours. So, and I'm not totally surprised by that. 34th in the States is pretty good. It's very good. I think we knew regionally, when we look at it, we're not totally surprised by that. That's kind of what we've been trying to say.
We've had significant decreases in crime rate. A lot of different drug rates over the past 4 or 5 years. Helping us out.
Is there any way we can get that article or the recognition? Because I also, Joe, I was in a meeting this week and I heard it and I'm like, oh, I hadn't heard about that. But I think anything that we can achieve and receive is going to be worthwhile, and we can put it on our website.
Absolutely.
All right, good job, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item, Mr. Musselman's not here, he was gonna address this, and so this is something we probably will talk about in the upcoming months. There's no real urgency to it, but just FYI for the board. We did receive 2 stormwater grants that we applied for. This is through the Hamilton County Stormwater District. And Joe, you're on that board, so you're well aware of what that program is, but a few years back, we applied for a grant to do a study on the township portion of McKelvey Road. Some portion of it's county and some is ours. But we looked at the township portion of McKelvey where there's some sheeting with water during heavy rain periods that comes across the road and impacts property owners and traffic. And we did get the funding to do the study, we did complete the engineering, and then we've since applied for the actual project, to complete the project. And we did receive half of that funding. The project estimate, I believe, was in the neighborhood of about $150,000. Or I'm sorry, 181 is what we requested from McKelvey, and we got a little less than 75. So we need to make a decision how we want to leverage that money, maybe with a skip application later. But we also did apply for $15,000 to do a structural repair on the pipe for pipe on Marview. We did receive that money. So every bit helps. I think this has been a good use of our leveraging, like we try to do with SKIP, and this is another tool available to try to get some infrastructure projects done. We will talk about the McKelvey piece and kind of some options at either our February or March meeting, especially when John's with us.
No, I think that's the Hamilton County Stormwater Oversight Board's been in existence now for probably 12 plus years, and while it was originally set up as something that was going to kind of map the township and come up with rules and regulations regarding stormwater, and there's some of our tax dollars, there's a per parcel fee that we pay to this entity every year. This is something that was mandated by the federal EPA, that every city, every county, community across the state adopt these plans. We've been able to take some of the money and put it back into concrete projects where it will help residents, where we can alleviate flooding. A lot of the money's gone to projects where there have been pipes that are failing, that are, they're being crushed and have to be replaced. So we're trying to take money out of this project, otherwise it was going for in certain ways, I felt a lot of bureaucratic paperwork in giving it back to the local community so that they can have some money to get some of these infrastructure projects done. And this is, I think, the first time we've really gotten a significant grant. There's about $500,000 that's awarded each year out of the Stormwater Oversight Board. So it's not a huge amount when you spread it across the county, but it's good that we got this, and hopefully we can use this money, like you said, Mike, and put it with some of our, maybe a community block or a SKIP grant, and come up with the money to fix this flooding problem.
John worked hard on the applications, and hey, if there's $500,000, we got almost 1/5 of it, 20% of that money in our community, close to.
Right.
I have a very brief personnel update, and that's just to inform the board. I did accept the resignation of Tim Finley Sr. Tim was a part-time paramedic firefighter. His resignation date was effective December the 27th, 2013. And I just want to let the board know that I have received, and this is kind of for the record to make sure that we reflect that we do have the Springfield Township Arts and Enrichment Council has submitted the 2013 report for township support. This is something that we sort of identified that we do periodically during township meetings, and of course at the end of the year, so we have the annual report as to their activities and their report regarding township support. And turn things over to Kim to bring us up to date on what's going on with community events and programs.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that on January the 31st, our Playhouse of the Park series will kick off. We're doing program Joan, Girl of Art at 7 o'clock p.m., and that's a free show. And then on February the 22nd, we'll have our annual Daddy-Daughter Dance. Tickets for that are on sale currently. Just to kind of also recap on some of the things that the Arts Council has done over the year, I did want to report that in the year 2013, although it's not the whopping $100,000 grants that the service department brings in, we were able to secure $9,050 in grant support for programs and an additional $988 for donations and sponsorships in the year 2013.
Very good, Kim. Way to go.
Keep up the great work.
Okay, and I know the board has copies of the departmental reports in the packet, so we're going to address that. So any question on that front? So I'll move on. At our December, I believe it was our regular meeting on December the 10th, the board passed several resolutions requesting that the county auditor provide what are known as certificate of estimated property tax revenues to be produced from a specified amount of millage. And this is something that is required by law before the board or any public entity wants to put an issue before the ballot regarding the tax levy, that you first require to get these sort of certifications and certificates from the county auditor that's verifying what a particular millage amount would generate. And I know at that meeting, but I think even maybe a couple of work sessions prior to that, we had a discussion that sort of was related to the JEDZ, JEDZ, that, you know, the other alternative as far as the revenue generating scheme, or really the only other one, is property tax, to be the other way funded. So at that meeting, we had discussed, well, if it's not a JEDZ, it's probably a property tax on the revenue side. And so the board made the request, we prepared the resolutions to get the information, and we did receive them, I believe, on the 7th, or I think they came in on the 7th or 8th, and we opened them on the 9th. And I do have those for the board. I can we asked for kind of a wide variety of range, starting with what 1 mil of new taxes would generate. And quite frankly, once you know what the 1 mil is, you can do math. It's pretty simple math after that. The 1 mil of new taxation, and again, this was a tax for sort of general government. What's the word I'm looking for, Larry or Laura? We did these, I think. Well, I guess we just asked specifically for the 1 mil. I didn't know what we were doing for it, but 1 mil would generate $599,660, according to these certificates. And the estimated annual cost to a homeowner for a home that's valued at $100,000 would be about $35. And again, there's an asterisk that puts in there and says that you know, when you use that $100,000 market, you have to factor in that they're factoring that they don't tax at 100% of appraised value, or that's, I think 35%. And then there's the, but in this one they mentioned that that's not receiving the 10% rollback, the 2.5% homestead reduction, and the current sales tax credit. So those things would not be included in that $35, and can be why that is. And we get asked that question a lot of times. Somebody says, my house is worth $100,000 at home. And you got to do the math. It's not just that simple calculation.
Mike, was that 35 twice a year or once a year?
It says annual.
It should be in.
Estimated annual cost to a homeowner at $100,000 based on it. So just to give you kind of, like I said, very simply multiply 1.5 or 1.5. Multiply 599, 660 times whatever the village is. And we did do that. I don't know if you want me to read each one of them. You have them that goes all the way up to the last one that we asked for was up to 3.5 mils. and 3.5 mills would generate just slightly over, well, almost $2.1 million, $2,098,812. And that would cost, the estimated annual cost of that would be about $122.50. Again, that's based on a $100,000 market value of the same stipulation. So I know this was, that's why we asked for this information. And just wanted to make sure the board was aware that we did receive it. And if that was a decision we wanted to take, we fulfilled that obligation.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin.
Thank you for pulling that up and researching it for us, because I think it's very important. A lot of individuals don't know, that what the actual millage is and how it equates out. And you made it very simple, anyone can figure that out, calculate it easily and determine what they're going to pay as far as tax.
The only thing I would say, Gwen, is that does change. I mean, that's not something that's set in
Right.
stone. If we had asked it 6 months ago, we may have gotten a slightly different number. If we ask it 6 months from now, it might vary.
It could go up or down.
Well, it's taken the total assessed valuation of all properties in Springfield Township is how they factor it. And I think sometimes what's not known is that residential is factored differently than commercial. And they have different components to them. And for us, that's important because we rely, most of our, well, almost all of our revenues, or a big percentage of our revenues, is from tax levies. And then there's also what's known as inside millage and outside millage. And that's also very confusing because how that's applied to your parcel is different as well. We only have 1.19 mills, which is a little over 1 total mills that's inside. And the basic difference of that is that on inside millage, and that's actually 0.34 of that, so about a third of the mill is what goes to the township general fund. That's the only property tax money that the general fund receives. Almost everything else that the general fund receives is what I would label as intergovernmental fund, gas tax, not gas tax, but a variety of LGF, things like that, local government fund taxes that come in. But, in total, I think Chris did the number, it's about 1% of all of our property taxes that goes to the general fund from the township. So the majority of that tax is going to police, fire, and then there's one mill for infrastructure, which is actually roads. In this case, a roads levy that was passed. But on inside millage, whatever's happening to your property value, that inside millage is applied to your property value as it is in any given year. Whereas, say, a police or fire levy works differently. If you pass a police levy of 1 mil police levy, per se, in 2007, it's applied to the value of your home in the year that levy was passed. So if your house was appraised at $120,000 in that year, that 1 mil is applied to the value of 2007. That never changes. It stays the same. So if the property values are going up, I guess that's the bargain, because that 1 mil is
Still there.
placed at a little lower. If your property values have decreased, like we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years in some cases, well, you're still paying 1 mil based on that 2007 valuation. So it always stays fixed in the year the levy was passed. Again, that's just for residential. For business, my understanding is that, I'm by no means an expert on any of this stuff, but my understanding is that is subject on business property, even the police or fire or road levy fluctuates according to the appraised value of that property at any given time. So a lot more complexity to it. That's just maybe some of the highlights of how a mill works, but not entirely.
Mike, as a newbie on the board, can you do me a favor, give me kind of a brief history of previous efforts on how planning of the JEDZ has always been kind of a part of the plan?
Well, I guess the one thing I would say, Mark, is planning is something I think we've been, strategic planning, to use a kind of general term, is something we've done for a long time. Going all the way back to 1996. I started here in 1995, and in 1996, we enacted our first vision plan. And we reached out to the community, and if memory serves me right, there were probably 20 or so members of our community that participated on a vision plan committee. The vision plan committee was designed to do really just a couple of things, just far-reaching goals. What are some of the things we wanted to be? What do we want to do as a township? They were somewhat generalized. But the other thing we did as a part of that is we tried to evaluate, sort of a report card. As being a new person here, I wanted to get feedback from the community, did some surveys to try to evaluate where were areas where residents thought we were doing an excellent job and doing it at the right level, and where were areas that they thought they wanted more. This is, I think what we did is very important. What was the level of importance to the particular resident, and how well we basically this quadrant, 4 quadrants of where a particular service ranked. And there were some cases we said, someone said, you're doing a great job, this particular service is important to you. We sort of labeled those as overkill areas. And then there were areas where we said focus was where somebody said it's very important and you're not doing such a great job. So it started way back then. We did land use planning as well, but really more to your point, about 2007 is where we updated the vision plan. And we increased it. I know we had, I think, about 50 or 55 members of the committee. And they were representatives from churches and schools and neighborhood civic associations, residents who have been engaged in the community over those years. And I think that group met for, I want to say 6 to 8 months and finalized their recommendation. And that's the first place the JED, and it wasn't specific to JEDZ, but it was, JED was the most common thing, same general concept, was indicated as something that the township should take advantage of and should enact a JED to create a specific revenue stream that otherwise wasn't being tapped. That was in the plan. We didn't take any action on that. But in 2010, starting in 2010, is when we went through our comprehensive neighborhood master plan. And probably the best way to describe what that was sort of taking all the previous plans we had done in a variety of different fashions and try to put them in sort of one document. And before we did that plan, we went out to each of the different neighborhoods. We identified what we thought were sort of 12 unique areas and unique neighborhoods in the township. Finneytown is an area that's long had their own civic association and sort of is defined loosely by what the school district boundaries are in Finneytown. Pleasant Run Farms, also a very strong civic association. So those neighborhoods were pretty well defined. There were some others that we kind of looked more geographically at regions. And we tried to do it so that neighborhoods weren't separated by school districts. So in other words, we didn't have a defined neighborhood that was in 2 school districts. We tried to find the right things. And we went out to each of those and provided a series. In the first half of those meetings, we sort of provided data. Some of it was the crime data that I talked about earlier. And just provided a whole variety of different information, what the land use was in a particular neighborhood, what the zoning was. And the second half was really getting feedback from them. And for most of those meetings, not all, we had that moderated by Dan Hurley from Channel 12. He agreed. He's a resident of the township, or was at that time. And he agreed to moderate it. We just wanted to get feedback. And we documented everything that was said at those meetings. And at the end of it, we had been out in all of the communities. And during those neighborhood meetings, we passed out something asking for people who would like to be on the committee, the neighborhood, comprehensive neighborhood master plan committee that was actually going to take everything we had heard and put that into one document. And so we did that. And we had, I can't remember how many volunteers, but at the end, I know the board somewhere there was 75 or 80 members of the committee. And then that group spent about a year meeting with staff. We would meet once a month. We would spend the first half of the meeting sort of talking about, particular subjects. Some of it was just informational, so that everybody, we wanted to get, the committee members sort of up to speed, so they had the same type of information that we were talking about for us. In other words, we would do a little history of how the departments formed, what services we provide, that type of thing. But at the end of each meeting, after about the first 3 months, we would then present recommendations that had come out of the meetings and things that we thought as staff and posed those to the groups. In each of the large group of 75, which is just an incredible number when you think of a committee of 75, that's a huge number, but the way it was managed is that each of them met at tables back at the Grove in their neighborhoods. So they might have had 5, 6, 7, I think maybe the largest one might have had 9 or 10 in their particular neighborhood. So they would sort of look at it first from a perspective of how's it impact their neighborhood, their immediate place that they live, and what were their thoughts, and then how, what were the recommendations that were specific to the neighborhood, and then township as a whole, things that all the neighborhoods were concerned about. And then we would get some consensus around the room. And by show of hands, and we had each one of the tables sort of have elected a spokesperson, and they would talk about what they thought about the recommendations. Did they agree with them, disagree with them? And in a long story, that's how we got consensus, and then those recommendations are what went into the neighborhood master plan. The JEDZ issue is clearly in there. In fact, the Community Improvement Corporation has also recommended by the most recent planning document that we probably took 2 years putting together. I would say, Kim, do you remember the total number of people that participated? I mean, not just the
70.
committee.
There were 70.
70, but I'm saying, I don't know if we were tallied how many people attended each of the neighborhood meetings and to put, because really that's what, it was a grassroots effort that came from there, but I think it was probably the most comprehensive. My background is in planning. I don't know any community that has done something as comprehensive to get as much grassroots input over a 2-year period. And if there is such a thing as consensus in the public sector, that was it. And that's the process that we went through. But that's where the JEDZ was specifically enumerated as a recommendation that the board should enact a JED or JEDZ if, in fact, we lost the major revenue source. And in this case, it said the estate tax. Obviously, we were aware that that potential existed during that time. And the Community Improvement Corporation is really something that I've been talking to the board for many, many years about. And we've done something earlier with the Arts and Enrichment Council. It's obviously for a whole different purpose, but in some ways designed to do kind of the same thing, because what we were hoping to do with Arts and Enrichment is really two things. The long-term goal was to take what we think is a very valuable and needed thing. That what the Arts and Enrichment Council does is important for our community. But we realized our dollars were shrinking, so if we could create something that it was an entity that was actually doing it, so it was getting done, but we could take it off of our expenditures, that would be a great thing. Plus, the Arts and Enrichment could do some things that we couldn't do in terms of flexibility and things like that. And that's really what the CIC is about. So the JEDS and the CIC, some of them have a long history going all the way back to 2007, but they're enumerated in the neighborhood master plan. Ultimately, we're hoping that's what the CIC is. We talk about the CIC probably only about the grant idea, and it's got a whole different purpose. It is economic development. That's why CIC was created. The idea long term would be who's doing economic development in Springfield Township. It's not likely to be physically different people than us, but it's off of our books. It can, it can get grants that the township couldn't get. It can be funded differently or privately or through other mechanisms and do things that are cumbersome for a township. So I know that's a very long explanation.
I only expect that from you.
But, and everybody says that, but it'd be great to give you a 30-second soundbite. This isn't 30-second soundbite stuff. It's not complicated, it's involved. And these things have so many moving parts that no matter what you say, if you don't give the full kind of story, you've left some piece out. And we've seen here over the last 6 months what happens when you don't tell everything, or at least try to tell everything, is that it goes off in a bunch of different directions or somebody doesn't know.
Can you give us a little more info on the township's economic development plan?
Well, in my mind, I think it's that. I think it's the comprehensive neighborhood plan. In my mind, and I think in our staff's mind, is our economic development plan. But what's unique about the comprehensive neighborhood master plan is it has recommendations that talk about township services, township policies, but then it goes in and it has all the land use plans for those particular neighborhoods. And we have done individual economic development and master plans for each of the 12 neighborhoods that I've identified. Have sort of 5, 10, 15-year plan of goals that were worked on by those individual residents and comprehensive with everybody. And then we look at the area that we call core, which is, a loosely defined area, kind of what we think of as our central area at Galway and Winton. And the township, of course, owns some property at the Water Nursery. We own about 60 total acres in that general vicinity. We've done some very detailed plans for that particular area. So, in many ways, that is the economic development plan for the township. But it's, I think in another way, Mark, it's everything we do. Somebody says define economic development, that's every, I think, since 1995, every action that we have taken is in some way been related to promoting economic development. For Springfield Township as a veteran community, that's as much about attracting residential as it is commercial and industrial. I wish there was a healthier mix in terms of land use for our community, but as a built-out community, it's very difficult for us, especially with our topography, and we don't have vacant land in this community. We're essentially built out, so our redevelopment, or our economic development plan is largely redevelopment and reutilizing and revitalizing neighborhoods, because that's the pattern that's been here before any of us came on this board, or with the township. It's been sort of set. We grew up in the 50s and 60s, and it was a veteran community. Those decisions were made, long before that. Blue Ash is what it is today, not because of the current people who might be doing a great job, but because they had a vision back in 1950 or in the 40s of what they wanted to be, and they made some decisions. So that's our economic development plan. But it's everything. It's our police department, it's our fire department, it's having good roads, it's having good government, it's having good, strong parks and arts and enrichment. As far as what most people traditionally think is economic development, I think it's the things that Chris and I do and have done over the years to try to bring new development in. We conducted numerous studies that we've had planning firms and specialists come in to talk about it. And anybody in the retail business will tell you retail follows housing. So if your housing is not strong, you're not going to get the desired retail. And so, and we made that mistake. I think we started on, well, how do we fix the border? How do we get more retail? How do we bring more business in? So until you fix your housing, or you've got your housing in place and have opportunities for that, you're not going to attract the retail. And that's been our plan. Obviously, we meet individually for anybody that calls us and wants to do it. We've gone to trade shows and met with developers. We've gone to New York to meet with the owners then of Brentwood Plaza, and it was from that meeting that Brentwood committed to make the changes that they made to that plaza. They were sort of letting it deteriorate. And we went there and spoke with them, and I just never forget, they said, well, look at your property. He said, look at your street, and what do you guys do? And so that was kind of a mutual understanding and played a big role in why the streetscape happened. And they said, look, if we see you're committed to about your community, we'll commit. And that led to a pretty good partnership and making, I think, close to by $15 or $20 million worth of investment, or at least that has led to. So the plan is basically there, but I think it's in another way, it's a little bit of everything we do. Is what's
A lot of people, I think, feel like if we did better at economic development, that would solve all the problems. So why don't you also tell me how economic development impacts revenue as far as property taxes are concerned?
Well, taxes, we've talked about our tax rate. It's critical. I mean, I think we've touted that in the last 5 or 6 years, we've probably been able to take specific action that are led to maybe $20 million in new economic development, specifically really kind of just in this immediate area of the road due to the streetscape. And I would say that $20 million investment is probably led to about $160,000 of roughly, again, using rough numbers, that's probably $160,000 in new taxes to the township. Now, that doesn't mean there's far more taxes being paid, because the townships, of someone's tax bill, whether it's residential or commercial, the township portion for that is roughly, 25%, 27% of the total bill. So, but that's, it gives you an idea that property, I think we were pulling this the other day out of curiosity and some numbers, and a property of about $1 million, which is roughly what this strip center right next to us is appraised at, generates about $8,000 in property to the township. Their tax bill's significantly higher than that, but the township portion that we get is about $8,000. Now, you also got to remember, the general fund gets 1% of that. And what we're really talking about with this JEDZ is 1% of that total tax bill. The other portion of that is going to police and fire. That's generally how we support our major expenditures, which are police and fire, our two largest departments, and the lion's share of those taxes are paid for public safety. So it's why the estate tax is so critical, why the local government is so critical for the general fund, and why those cutbacks have hurt significantly, because if we go out and bring in a $15 million new property at $15 million, which I think that's probably roughly about what Brentwood Plaza is appraised at. I don't know if that includes some of the outlots or that includes the Kroger piece of it, it's a separate building, but roughly in that neighborhood. Our largest shopping center is probably paying somewhere in the neighborhood about a little less than $250,000 of property tax to the township, and 1% of that's going to be general fund. So that's sort of the, yes, economic development is critical. Yes, we need to keep improving businesses, but the one thing I would point out that is unique is that we don't have a lot of, I'm not saying we have none, but we don't have a lot of undeveloped land. So with redevelopment, you're talking about a new project coming in, it's the increment that you're capturing, because something was there. In other words, the new Bob Evans is a good example. Bob Evans, I didn't look at it, and I'm guessing that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million project, maybe in that ballpark, so it's probably similar to the strip center. And so if you say, well, that's 8,000 new taxes to the township, and 1% to the general fund, but something was there. Angelo's was there before. It might not have been appraised at that level, but it wasn't zero. And so you have to do this subtraction. So, to get to the type of revenue that we're talking about from the general fund perspective, to say, how could we generate $1 million or $600,000 or $700,000 of new general fund revenue? It's not a property tax, and economic development is the way to do that. You're going to need a lot of rental plazas. And quite frankly, there is not the land that we have without scraping a lot of properties. And Joe, I know you went and visited with Nashville and looked at a project that they were very interested in, and met with a developer down there. And on the bus down there, we had a rep for Target. Who I had met with and Chris had met with for probably the better part of 3 or 4 years. And they were Target wanted to build a brand new store in Springfield Township. And, they did. A lot of folks thought that would have been great. Some folks didn't think it was so good. We want a big box. They didn't come here not because of our community. They came here because they couldn't find a site to locate the amount of acreage that they needed in proximity with the area where they wanted to be, without taking down significant existing residences. And they weren't willing to buy them, so they were asking us to acquire them, raise them, and then turn the property over to them for free. And unfortunately, it's not always the case, but in some cases, that's what communities are willing to do, or there's land that's readily available, and your development costs are not there. We're not on a major interchange, even cross county, we don't have a full interchange at Winton. We're desirable to a lot of very attractive uses, and I think we've done a good job to market to those individuals. There are a lot of people. I think really in the last year it's been really exciting because the phone's ringing again from individuals, but they're not $15 million projects. They're some of them are more exciting than others, but the challenge is always finding the spot and allowing them to be, in most cases they've got to acquire something and take it down. And so that makes the project very, very costly, it makes it very, very difficult, and I think that's probably our biggest challenge right now, economically. We have a great market. I mean, we finally, I think, have gotten through to the retail market that this is a great place to be. Panera wasn't going to come here, Chipotle wasn't going to come here. The folks that looked at Wings and Rings said he'll never make it, and we said we disagree. I don't think you know our community. You're using stats. These residents will support these uses, and they'll be very successful. And if you've ever ridden past Chipotle, and anytime you can get to the parking lot, and I think Wings and Rings is doing very, very well. My conversations with Cy, we work hand in glove with them. That's why it's so hurtful when they say we're anti-business. If residents really knew how much we have done to bring in business, Panera wasn't coming here.
Well, Mike, remember with Applebee's, they were kind of the first, and they all looked at us and they said, "What's wrong with your community? There's nobody there." We said, "Hey, we're undiscovered, but if you come, you'll make money." And they did, and they came, and then Panera wanted to come.
Yeah, it's been and I think we now almost have not quite the opposite problem. We've captured it. We've sort of been captured. They don't ask those questions as much anymore. I think they know it because they see Panera there, they see Chipotle there, they see the businesses thriving. The biggest problem we have is where do we put them, and then what people want in terms of, if you go to acquire a property, the price is so high that it makes it not feasible. So that's a challenge. We're always going through cycles with markets and different things, and we've been in a down cycle, and we're coming out of that. That's no unique to us. But as I said, we're getting a lot of calls. But that just gives you an idea, and then you can do the math on different projects. But I think it would take about $110 million of new investment to equal what we're talking about what the JEDZ would generate. And that's total. Really, with the general fund only getting 1% of that total tax, that $1 million. So if you really do that, you're talking numbers that it's not going to happen in our community. I'm an optimist, but we got to be realistic. Those uses just don't come.
Mike, to go back to the property tax thing, one of the things that, one of the changes in state law was the rollback, the 10% rollback was eliminated for new levies. In the past, whenever a jurisdiction would pass a property tax, 10% of the cost of it would be paid by the state of Ohio. And those numbers, you may have said it, I didn't hear it. Do those numbers, that was like a new.
Yeah, I think that's
the way
I looked at this a week or 2 or 3 weeks ago. These were just extrapolating based on what they're paying now. And just, they got that little calculator anybody can do.
Okay.
County auditors, just plug in different values. I think we were just curious on some of them because I understand residential a little bit more than I understood how businesses are taxed. And there's different factors, but yeah, I don't know that would be a different case.
So the numbers provided by the auditors for new taxes, those were new levies.
Plugging in a different, it's not necessarily new levies, but are you talking about?
The millage numbers.
Those millage numbers are saying it's one new bill today.
Okay.
That's what it, that's.
So that wouldn't have the 10% rollback in.
I think he asked me.
Okay. That was my question.
Since we're talking about the whole subject of economic development, there was a point, and I can't recall, I think it was maybe a month ago where we had one of our meetings, and someone asked about incorporation. And at that particular point, you know, I asked you all if you could do some research and kind of explain, or I know the research data isn't available right now, so they're probably right in the middle of it, but can you be a little more specific about what incorporation is and what's the process, and are there any issues in relationship to that?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit tonight that you asked when, corporation, I guess, there is a process, and ultimately, and that's what we're talking about. We do this presentation to all our staff all the time, because everybody asks what's the difference between a township and a city and a village, and most people understand that. But we're a township. We're the oldest form of government, the first form of government in Ohio. And there is a process by which you can incorporate and become what's known as a municipal form of government. And in Ohio, and again, everything I'm saying is just unique to Ohio. It would be different in Kentucky or Indiana. In Ohio, depending on whether you're a village or a city, is purely a population.
Right,
So if
right.
you're over 5,000 population, you're a city, and if you're under 5,000, then you're a village.
Right.
So in our case, being in a community of about, roughly 36, 37,000, obviously it's the city that we would become. There's some subtle differences between a village and a city, but we're both municipal forms of government. We are not a municipal form of government. We're what's known as an unincorporated form of government. And the major difference is in authority. A city has greater discretion and greater authority than does a township. And maybe the easiest way to say that is townships generally can only do what state statute gives you specific authority to do.
Okay.
Where a city, or a municipal form of government, can sort of do anything. They can pass any law or take on any power as long as that is not specifically prohibited by a state statute, which is of course federal law. And obviously it's more complicated, but that's probably the simplest way to explain the differences. Now, it's really confusing. We are a home rule township, because years and years ago, the legislature decided that there were large urban townships that were unique, different than rural townships, and they needed to be granted different authority. I was probably cringing when I'm giving you my overview of this, but when you become a home rule township, in a way, we are saying, again, I'm simplifying this and generalizing it. A home rule township sort of can do anything a city can. So you can do anything as a home rule township. When I mean anything,
But then,
anything, you can take any actions that are not in conflict with state or federal law. You said, well, you're a city then, right? You have all, well, no, because there are many specific prohibitions that still limit the authority of townships that don't happen with cities. But where now kind of, I think some have said, where the statute is silent, a home rule township can do it. So you're only prohibited by specific prohibitions now by state. And so that's kind of the backdrop for what the major difference is between a city or an incorporated form of government and a township. We are a home rule township. We've taken that action. To become a city, and in some cases, and the one that I'm most familiar with is, of course, Westchester, is a township. Westchester at least 4 times, and maybe one since I've left, but I worked in Westchester, or what was known as Union Township at that time, went through several incorporation attempts where they wanted the township to become the city of Westchester. And all of them obviously failed. They were not voted in. The process is ultimately it's not decided by the Board of Trustees or by any government. It's done by petition, and it's placed before the ballot. And the electorate decides whether they're going to become Westchester City or remain a township. And obviously the electorate out there decides against it. A very close election, by the way, each time. The process is difficult. It's a very complicated process by Ohio law on how you do that. There are several stages and several preliminary votes where you have to first, I believe, vote in an incorporation committee. I'm trying to remember back. It's been close to 20 years, but several steps that you have to go through. It's a cumbersome, difficult process. But at the end of the day, you have to evaluate whether that's a good choice. So when I first came to Springfield Township, that question was posed to me many, many times because they had just come from Westchester. And, again, we'll do the research and look at it and do this in a lot more in depth, but it's never been something I don't think we've looked at as a board as an option because for me, it was pretty fresh in my mind that this community isn't structured that way. Or, again, for all the reasons we just talked about with the economic development, our land use patterns are not structured in a way where we make money. And I think initially what you're looking at is that form of government better for your situation? Having more control, more authority, more whatever. At the end of the day, are you going to gain additional revenues that are going to enable you to do more things versus the additional responsibilities? Because cities have additional responsibilities than townships do. Townships is probably the best form of, we talk about shared service, and it's really ironic because that's what we hear from our legislatures all the time. Got to be more shared service, got to be more. Townships, by their very nature, are designed as shared service creatures, and that yet, what have they attacked the hardest is that very form. And then we talk to a lot of them, they say, well, we want to get rid of townships, but we want you to do shared service. We are, and what I mean by that is, we get direct services from Hamilton County. By law, Hamilton County has to do things that are required of the county, because the county is also a statutory form of government. And so there are things that are county roads. Whitman Road is a county road. It's not a township road. We don't have any maintenance responsibilities or repair, nor do we even have the legal authority to throw salt or plow Whitman Road without some type of other agreement. So that's not our road. We're not allowed to do that. There are,
A lot of people don't understand that.
no, there's about 35 other county roads, like Fleming Road. Generally, for a lot, not 100%, but I always tell people, if the street has a double yellow line on it, it's probably a county and not a township road, and that is their responsibility by law, and that is the way it's structured. We, as a township, are not allowed to have a building department. That is not something we're allowed to have unless the county in which we reside does not have it. So we don't have that authority. As a health department, we don't have to have a health department. If we were city, we would have to have a health department, have to have a building department, be responsible for every single road. And as a result of that, cities are given greater taxing authority. And the primary greater taxing authority that they have is the income tax. And I don't know too many cities, there might be some in Ohio in this region, that don't have an income tax. That's their primary state. You have property taxes as well, and their residents pay that property tax to the county, the same as our residents do, but they don't get any direct service from the county.
So Mike, if we incorporated, we still have to pay the same property taxes?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, Joe, that's a good question because you have to have some property tax. It might not be the same because those were enacted for the township. That is a very complicated legal question because there are cities, and the township still remains in that city, and there's taxing in both of them. So it really depends. There are some incorporation efforts where the township completely goes away. It's abolished, it no longer exists. In our case, it would be how the process works. So it kind of depends. But the bottom line is, and again, when we looked at this when I first came here, it doesn't make economic sense. Because the amount of new revenue that we would gain, there could be a few other things. There would be some grants we'd be eligible for. We might get a slightly higher distribution in gas tax and things of that nature. So I'm not saying it's just the income tax, but the income tax is the biggest thing. If we were doing an income tax in Springfield Township, or as a new city, it would largely be what this JEDZ provided. It wouldn't be significantly more than that unless you didn't offer reciprocity. Because the vast majority of our residents are paying income tax, they're just paying it to where they work. Whether they work in Blue Ash, Cincinnati, or wherever it is that they may work, if it is a municipal form, they're paying it to that community, they're not getting anything directly back for that. So you know, in some ways, it would probably be the difference of the 15% we're giving Mount Healthy. There's a few others that we would capture, because you capture home occupations and a few, you know, so it could range, but it'd be generally in that range. And yet, all you have to do is look at it and say, when roads are our responsibility, you know, tens of millions of dollars of repair and replacement for that project sort of make it, you know, right off the top, kind of a no-brainer. But the other issue is the law requires that in order to incorporate, you have to be contiguous. And we're not a contiguous community. We have islands that are detached from the rest of the township. And for that reason, the entire thing that is Springfield Township today could not become the city-owned whatever. Could the main body there, the vast majority of it, yes, that area could incorporate, but those islands would remain in the township. And the township that would remain, of course, would be Springfield. And that's happened. I mean, that's largely what Columbia Township is. I don't think, you know, theirs were more annexations.
Right.
But, you know, they have, I think, 7 or 8 or 11 different little tiny islands, and their township doesn't have anything that's completely one. But in our case, this building and all the township assets would still, as I understand it, it would be owned not by the new city, it'd be owned by the township. And the new city would have to not only start over and build all new facilities for police and fire and so forth, the township would still own these things to provide for those outlying areas that still remain.
And the city would have to petition the probate court to get its own assets. Because the township property tax is obviously paid for what we have. So you're withdrawing from the township, you're withdrawing with nothing until the probate court says what you can get. So obviously, if the main body incorporated in the city, you would make an argument that we get some of the assets back. That's a very complicated.
It sounds complicated, and it sounds like it's a lengthy process.
Well, Gwen, one thing I'll say, Gwen, and I'm originally from Westchester, and so I was there when there were a lot of battles fighting over whether or not there was a group that really wanted to make the city of Westchester. And the big reason for it was they have much more commerce and more industry than us, and they wanted to tax the people who work there. It was all about income tax. That's why they wanted to incorporate Westchester. And so the people who lived there, you know, of course, said, no, we don't want that.
So, and I think, Joe, the other big issue was zoning. People were afraid that, you know, I mean, the incorporation isn't a bad thing. I hope I'm not painting it as, and I think in certain instances, in fact, in Westchester's case, at least if you viewed it from purely a financial standpoint, you know, and said, well, is it better as a township? You know, we have more revenue, we able to do more things. It did. It worked. It made a lot of sense. Now, you know, the people that were opposed to it for a variety of different reasons, they didn't like that form of government. They thought it was going to be too much of a bureaucracy. They didn't like cities. They looked at, you know, Cincinnati and the city they were familiar with, and that's where all the problems are. But there was a definite concern that, you know, they didn't have zoning control. They were growing like crazy. Folks were concerned about, you know, who's fixing the roads, and they had traffic jams, and they thought that a city or municipal form of government would give them greater authority to do that. And it would have in many cases, but that's when they enacted local zoning and began to do some of the things that, it was interesting, because I went through two of them, and the very people in the beginning who were pro-incorporation were anti in the last two, because they said all the things we thought we couldn't do as a city were doing. But again, from a financial situation, I think it made financial sense for them to become a city.
One thing you did mention about Winton Road, I didn't understand that. So we would take responsibility for that. I know we have 275 going through us up north and Ronald Reagan. I mean, do we get those as well?
Not necessarily on the, I don't think you get them from a maintenance. Well, it really depends on what maintenance. Maybe salt, I have to look at, I think ODOT does the interstates.
Okay.
I think that would be
roads.
The one I'm not sure of is Cross County, because I believe the county salts Ronald Reagan Highway. The interstates, I think, is done by ODOT. And this is not to say that we couldn't have agreements. You know, if you did incorporate, you could could still, have agreements to do it. For instance, the city of Wyoming, maybe one, or a smaller city, Wyoming or Mount Healthy, sometimes they don't have their own building department because they don't have enough, so they contract. My point is, it doesn't mean they have to have their own, they have to pay for the cost of having it. So they may contract with regional planning to do it, but they're paying for that, whatever the contract might be. But it is their responsibility. Townships, if you look at the law, it says this is what we have to do, and this is what we're permitted to do, and this is what we're prohibited to do. And when you look at the list of what we have to do, it's very short. It's roads and cemeteries. Police, fire, those things are not required by law that they be provided. Common sense tells you residents are going to need those things, so the residents are demanding those services. But state law does not mandate we do them. In cases of cities that are mandated, they have to do much more, and they are the only one to do it. Now, they contract to have done, but they're still paying for that service. And as I said, I don't want to make this an affront on cities and villages. They're perfectly good forms of government, and I just don't think that for some of the reasons that are addressed, in this as being the answer, financially, no. If you want to do it for more authority or greater powers or more ability to enact more laws, cities have greater authority than townships. No doubt about that, no question about that. But financially, it just wouldn't make sense for us. And we'll do the more in-depth study and go through the details and provide a little bit more meat on that pretty sketchy review. But it's just, that's, I think somebody said we haven't even looked at it. I think we've always looked at it, but it's such a no-brainer financially. That doesn't make too much sense.
Well, at least that's a cliff note version so far. And the best is yet to come, evidently more research is going to be done, I think. I think you were going to give me some type of feedback, or the community some feedback, in March or something like that?
I would hope we get it by late February, March.
Okay.
Well, it probably depends on how detailed we want to get, but I would try to put a little bit more specifics to the process. But in general, I think the whole contiguous thing, water right off the bat, just for that, we have to be contiguous in what we do with these islands.
Right.
But it does have to be voted in by the residents. That's not the decision of the board.
Well, I just want to tell you too, at the end of the day, when we give you where the breakdown is, there are going to be enough instances we don't know how the assets will go. Because the township has indebtedness, and the one thing the statute does say, that the court must consider the indebtedness of the township when it provides the assets. Well, here's indebtedness in other buildings. So, does the new entity take over the indebtedness, or do we not get the bill for it? And the probate court decides that.
Laura, I remember that in Westchester. That was one of the big things that the opponents of incorporation said, we don't really know what we're buying here or what we're getting into, because you've got to incorporate, but you don't know what the end product's going to look like the way the law is.
Petition to get after the incorporation.
Yeah, you incorporate before you know who your council is.
Yeah.
So you don't know if they're going to run or what they're going to do.
Yeah.
One thing I would say about that, municipalities have the ability to levy a 1% earnings tax without the vote. So they can do up to a 1% earnings tax by voting council or commission, if that's the method that they form. But they can do that without a vote, but anything beyond 1%, they have to do.
So they can do that up front if you incorporate.
Well, assuming that the new council is seated, yes, they could say, okay, we're going to enact one bill. That's what most of the municipalities around did that. They used the 1%, they started at 1, and then, because they needed more, they went to their electorate to add to that, and I think the range, you'll find them below 1, you'll find them, but they can do up to 1 without any type of, that's an authority that they have.
Thank you.
One of the other things that we talked about, Mike, a little bit tonight at CIC, Community Improvement Corporation.
Yeah, we had that on the agenda, actually, to do kind of updates on that and corporation, just to kind of touch on that. So you meet when I punch.
Well, I don't mean to do that, but I think from the last meeting we had, it's obvious there's some total understanding as to what that is, and I guess the Community Improvement Corporation would not be something we would be looking at just for the purpose of making these economic grants, but it's actually, it's kind of like what it sounds like. It's to improve the community through economic development. Is that?
Yeah,
That's the primary goal of it.
In order, when I looked at the statute years and years ago, I mean, she's telling me today her file's only 6 years old on that. You know, I think there are community improvement corporations that are all over the region.
There already are?
Oh, yes. I mean, everybody knows about 3CDC. That, in effect, is sort of what it is. And they can have a variety of different purposes. I mean, if you look at the statute enumerates a lot of powers that a CIC can have. And one of them is to manage grants and things that we've talked about. But, you know, initially, 5 years ago, before we even knew this was coming down, we thought that a CIC was many times they're like development companies, and they exist to do the development. That's what 3CDC does for Cincinnati. It sort of took economic development out of the city's offices. It's still getting done. The city works closely with 3CDC on an agenda of trying to revitalize, and in this case, they've done a lot of stuff, but you know, Open Line has been largely revitalized by this 3CDC. It's doing the same thing, it's got the same purpose that the city or the township would use it for. We do, as I said, the economic development township happens in Ann. It's generally Chris, myself, and to a certain extent, Kim, on various things. What a CIC would do is, as I mentioned earlier, looking at more recent years what our budget was, I like to take that expense maybe off the township, and this is a long-range dream, just like it is for the arts and enrichment, that 5 or 10 years from now, maybe it's self-sufficient. Arts and enrichment is a charitable organization. That's how it was founded. So if an individual wanted to make an endowment or an individual wanted to make a donation, it's a tax-deductible donation. And we're hoping that through the grants that Kim's doing, through a variety of things, that it can be funded independently of township funds. The township still has our employee actually running the Arts and Enrichment Council. So it's not added staff, it's not a new bureaucracy. We use our finance director to do that. It's not an additional burden from that standpoint, nor is it an additional relief from the staffing time, but we can take, our dream is that we take it off of our books so it's not an expense. We still get the same thing done, the board still has the same control, so it's in line with what we want to do. And the IRS actually wanted it. They wanted it to be township employees that are running it because of the concerns over the charitable donation thing being used. The CIC is similar to that, but I don't think we would need it as it wouldn't be a charitable donation organization. It can hold and own property, and with the development of the Word Nursery, I think it's the tool that's going to serve us to get that project off the ground. Could we do it under our current structure as a township? We could. It's difficult, it's cumbersome. It's much smoother to do that, where the CIC could own the property. And again, it's just theoretically. Ultimately, it would be a board or the board of directors of the CIC to decide exactly how it would work. But for instance, if we had a developer that wanted to come in and do the project that we wanted for a portion of wood or some property that the township owned, they could pay us for that property. That money would go to the CIC, and the CIC, that could become some of the operating money. And the idea would be that the CIC is a very limited scope. It can't spend the money on police and fire or doing anything other than that very limited scope of promoting economic development and keeping, so maybe it takes those revenues and it uses those revenues to acquire more property. And, in the end result thing is that we're building a tax base. I'm simplifying this, but yeah, that's the concept, Joe. And whether we do a JEDZ or not, it would still be my recommendation to the board that we do a CIC. Obviously, we'll be doing the grant piece, but it still has a perfectly, the same reasons why we did arts and enrichment. And we've been talking about that for the last 3 budgets. And new arts and enrichment was probably the first one. But yeah, the CIC, I think, is something that we need to do, is what other communities have. And, you know, we'll put a little bit more detail to that as well, because we got to figure out, okay, exactly where the statute is forming. The statute is sort of vague on, I mean, clearly numerous townships can do it. It gives a very detailed explanation of who the board is if you do a county-wide one, but it's less clear as to how that happens, and I think it just would happen by resolution of the board. You would create the board, and you would decide who's on it, and those kinds of things. So I think you have pretty good discretion there, but that's what we're still researching. But it's exactly what it's for. There's probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 different powers or purposes of it, but they're all, every one of them say economic development, or, taking on vacant property. You can even do code enforcement out of CIC. So we look at it as a tool that doesn't have some of the same sort of restrictive burdens that we have in the law to do some of the things, because townships are made to do townships and cities are made to do. So that's why cities, townships, villages have used CICs, because it's easier, it's smoother, and that's exactly what they're created for. That's their purpose, is to hold property, to sell property, work with developers, and, like I said, 3CDC, probably one of the biggest landowners in Cincinnati at some point, owning all these properties, but they're not owning them to own, they're owning them to get developed and rehabbed and then sold and owned privately, and that becomes part of the city's tax base. So conceptually, before we even talk about it for the grant argument, I think there's a whole solid purpose and something I would strongly recommend and pursue either way, regardless of what we do today.
Yeah, I think it's very informational because I knew about the CICs, but I didn't realize the relevance of it and how widespread it was used. And I don't think a lot of our residents in our community clearly understood. Hopefully they're beginning to understand a little bit more, but basically that it isn't something brand new. It's something that's been out there for a while, and it's just...
It is. I think from our standpoint, one thing, and I'll take the blame for this, we probably haven't clarified that when I'm talking about, it's another entity sort of on paper, and it has some very specific legal status in the way that it's created, but we're not talking about a whole additional staff or any building that they would have to have. It would be no different than what we have with arts and enrichment, which is 3 of our staff persons and then 2 members of the community serve on the board. They meet here, we don't have additional offices and different additional expenses for that. So it wouldn't be a separate bureaucracy for it, at least as we envision it. Now, maybe someday, if it, moves into something really large like we would require more staff. But at least initially, that's not what we visualize. We're just looking for some of the, reduce some of the burdens that we have and some of the legal restrictions that we have as a city.
Well, one of the things that, we're having a discussion about the JEDZ, and it's on the agenda tonight. And I know one of the topics that was raised at the last meeting, and I received an email from somebody that was questioning, is the JEDZ law as we proposed it legal? In other words, are the uses that we're proposing authorized by law? And Laura, I wonder if you could address that, because that's obviously a fundamental issue.
It is. I've heard that a lot. That's not true. Absolutely. The township JEDZ is no different than any other JEDZ I looked at, except in the ways we discussed on the contract. It's designed for economic development. It is designed to assist the areas. Actually, the township JEDZ, because the area that's going to be covered, it makes more sense for it to be applied the way we're applying it, because it's going to go in the general fund. It's a lot of area. The concerns that have been raised in Columbus are that you're taxing a small portion of your township. Some of them even do 1 employee, basically. And then you take that money, you put it in the general fund, and then you use it for something entirely different, which is permitted. I mean, there's nothing illegal about that. The JEDZ statute permits you to use the funds raised by the income tax for the JEDZ and for the purposes of the contracting parties. You're permitted to do that. So there's nothing illegal even about that extreme, where you're just using it for very, very limited purposes in the JEDZ zone and in the general fund. Absolutely permitted.
That's the way the law is.
That is the way the law is, and that's the way the law has always been. 1997, I went back to see if there was ever any change on that, and there wasn't. It always said that. It always said the money could be used in that way. And the money is being used in that way in every jurisdiction that I'm aware of that has a JED. There's a few JEDs, and Chris probably knows these better than I do, but when we did this JEDS agreement, I looked at every JEDS contract I could get my hands on. I mean, that's what municipal lawyers do. You try to make sure you're in line with what everybody says. The JEDS law is not, as most revised code sections are, it's not always clear in every aspect, so you go to your fellow lawyers, you go to fellow contracts, you see what you have. Our language to the contract is not that much different than the language of all the contracts I read. And certainly I try to make it better. I try to make it clearer. That's what you do. I have discussions with other lawyers as to what sections they have. But yeah, the concept that this is an illegal use of the JEDS law, in my mind, is blatantly false. And I resent that because I think it's funny, and I've said this with all my clients, for anyone to suggest that I'm the most risk-taking lawyer that there is on the planet is just absolutely ludicrous. I am very conservative, and my clients, and you all know the kids.
Michael always says that.
He should. If it isn't absolutely clear that it can be done, we aren't going to do it. So I have no reservations in saying that what we've done is absolutely lawful. I would not recommend to my clients or permit my clients to do something that was illegal. I worked very long and hard to become a lawyer, and I'm not going to lose that for one client, no offense. No matter how much I love the client, it's not lawful, I'm not going to do it, and I'm certainly not going to draft it. So, no, I mean, there's no argument that can be made that this is not a lawful contract. You can make arguments that, we should do it a different way. There are jurisdictions that do things differently. But as I said, and Chris and I talked about this earlier, our contract is very similar to every other contract. You're going to get different percentages that the jurisdictions give to one another. The Sycamore tax one is the one I'm most familiar with, that having just been passed. They're giving a lesser percentage to the municipality, but that's going to generate, how much money is that going to generate?
In the neighborhood of $67 million.
Yes. So, you can get a municipal partner for 1% of, $6 million. You're not going to be able to get a municipal partner for 1% of $1 million.
Right.
So, the percentages are going to be different. What you're going to do to improve the districts are going to be different. Some jurisdictions, if you have a JEDS, you know what you need in that jurisdiction. When we did our initial JED, we knew that there were some road improvements we were looking at for Hamilton Avenue. So you look at whether that's what you're going to do with it. And there are several JEDs and JED, without disease, throughout Ohio where they have them for just a road issue. I mean, they come together for a road issue and they say that. Because that area had a very specific need and they formed for that purpose. And that's fine. I mean, those are as acceptable as the ones that are more general for general economic development purposes. So either way is appropriate. And as I said, there's going to be some differences in the contract with percentages. I think really differences there will be. Contributions, I mean, our contract has a $30,000 contribution from non-healthy. Some contracts will have no financial contribution from the municipal program. Some will have very large contributions. It all depends on what you're trying to do. And the statute allows for that. The statute does not say that you have to have a specific amount from any entity. It says that you can give services, promises of services, money, cooperation, anything can be used as a contribution from both parties.
Some are 50-50.
Some of them are 50.
They're 50-50. And you get 50%, you go 50%. And some of them go all the way to, I think, to 1%.
I've seen a 1%.
Some are the complete opposite. I know that.
What do you mean?
I mean, in Butler County, for example, there's actually two different JED agreements between the city of Hamilton and Fairfield Township, one of which is where the city of Hamilton gets 75% and the township gets 25%. Then they have another one where the township gets 75% and the city gets 25%. There's one in Franklin County where the township gets roughly 38 or 40% and the village gets 60%. I talked to the Ohio Township Association and did an inquiry in terms of what do they know of different JED or JEDs that are throughout the township. They're aware of about 50 to 60 different agreements that are in place between townships and villages or cities, of which about half of those, a little more than half, are structured in the exact same way that we're proposing here. That it's for the general services and governance and promotion of economic development. It isn't for a specific project or any sort of infrastructure improvement. It's for anything that facilitates economic growth and economic development in the zone or the township. And so ours is not unique in that aspect. There's many throughout the state that do the exact same thing, such as Sycamore's and Columbia's and many of the others. So,
But Chris, those entities are so small, they're nothing compared to us,
which is
as far as Sycamore Township.
correct. Well, Sycamore Township, you're right, except Sycamore Township's property tax valuation is probably 3 times ours.
Oh, okay.
Whereas our commercial property tax valuation in the township is about 60 million, theirs is over 200 million.
Oh, well, that is a
They
big.
have Kenwood Mall.
In the town center's probably
Yeah.
150.
And our employment centers are concentrated and are not spread out. They're in one general area of the community. So while there are unique aspects of the community itself, the actual contract and the purposes of the JED are consistent throughout the majority of those that are in place.
Well, and also you know, to the generality of the statements in the contract, you make them general. I mean, what you're going to do, you make it very general, because you don't know what you're going to do, right? I mean, the contract's long, it lasts for a long time. You have no idea what needs that area will have. So everyone makes them very general. You say expanded services, road improvements, infrastructure improvements. I mean, the language that we have for what we're going to do as far as joint economic is very similar to what other jurisdictions are doing for just that reason. And the law allows you to modify that contract at any time. So if, say, one of the areas in the JEDS requires a major road improvement, you can list that as something that the JEDS would be paying for. You can amend that at any time. So it is all very general, but it is supposed to be very general. It lasts for a very long time. So if you just said to improve, 5,000 feet of Hamilton Avenue, that's all you would do. And that would allow you to impact going forward. So just as far as the contract, the term is identical to most of the terms in these JEDs. And when people spoke to the length of the term, that's pretty much consistent with what I saw in the agreements I looked at. And my recollection is there wasn't one that I saw that was different than I looked at.
One of the unique things that we do have in ours that a lot of communities didn't include was that we have the ability, we talked about this at the last meeting, we have the ability to terminate this agreement solely at the discretion of the township. A lot of these communities don't have it. And that was something I know the board asked for.
That was one of the things that I said we had to have, because if we don't need this thing, I've never been a fan of it, but if we need it, but if we ever get to the point where we don't need it, if the law changes, we can't see the future, then I want to be able to get rid of it.
That, I would call that the Johanna law provision. It's not anywhere else. And, I mean, I said it
I'm
last
more sure
week.
if they, yeah.
Mount Health agreed to that, and I've got to say that it's highly laudable, because you don't normally agree to a termination provision at the sole discretion of one of the other parties. I really think that showed that they were trying to be a really excellent municipal partner on this. Because I didn't, if I were representing them, I would have some qualms about that as well. So I thought that was a great provision from the township standpoint. It showed that they understood what our feelings were toward this. And that doesn't exist in any contract. I can tell you that. I reviewed lots of contracts, and a one-side termination is not in those contracts.
Exactly. Well, last time, we're kind of getting into this, last time we did have kind of a back and forth about what's in this contract and what's not, and, you know, some people say, oh, you can't, you know, this isn't in there, it is. Can you, I don't know, Laura or Chris, one of you kind of go through the highlights of it?
As far as we're all in it.
Not
As far as
paragraph,
differences,
not paragraph by paragraph,
Yeah,
just so people understand what we are talking about.
I would say 90% of it's purely statutorily required.
It really is. I mean, what you have to do in the contract is you have to list the area to be included in the JEDZ, what each partner is going to contribute. That's what we said, that Mount Health is contributing $30,000 per year to the JEDZ. And you can, as I said, you can change the contributions as you go along, and the contract allows for that. The term of the contract, we said, was 40 years, by reflection.
It's the initial 40 with 3
10-year
10-year
renewals. Thanks, Chris. And there's the renewals the renewals are not automatic, and the party can give notice that they don't want to renew. There's the automatic termination if something changes in the law that makes it invalid to have one. Voluntary termination, we discussed, if there's a legislative act or modification. And basically then there's a long section that creates the board. That's basically statutory, because how the board is created, the JEDZ board, not the township board. And has them create bylaws when they come into being. You have to establish what happens if the board dissolves, how the property goes. And then there's a section on the income tax. Again, pretty standard, authorizes them to establish an income tax. The way it's worded is difficult, but it's just on earnings. And it discusses who's going to collect, which is not healthy. It's going to be collected through RETA, Regional Income Tax Agency. Gives a distribution of the net revenues.
And I think the only other provision, if I were to note, which most, if not all contracts have in it, is the prohibition of the partner municipality from annexing any portion of the township without our consent.
Which is a helpful provision, as Chris said, most of the.
It's pretty common.
So, and those are the highlights. As Chris said, a good portion of it is dictated by the statute. And the other is really nothing.
So in the contract, it talks about the 1.5%, right?
Yes.
Now, I don't, that hasn't changed since I remember reading, and I remember reading a lot of other contracts throughout the state. Is the 1.5%, is that pretty norm for, I mean, are there other communities around us that have that amount?
Let me say, when we looked at who our eligible partners were with potential JEDZ, we looked at 20 different communities that we legally could partner with.
Okay.
And we looked at what their income tax rates were.
Okay.
Of those 20, roughly 11 or 12 of those have income tax rates that are higher than 1.5%.
I know, working in the city, I know what I paid.
Right. So the 1.5% is of the areas that we can partner with, which is essentially this area of the county and most of Hamilton County. We are right in the middle, if not the lower portion of the income tax rate, at 1.5%. In fact, of our eligible partners, there were only 2 that had a rate lower than that. So I think the 1.5% is something that is average, if not a little slightly less than average, in terms of this area and specifically the partners that we could have had as a JEDZ partner.
Well, the statute says that you have to use the rate used by the municipal budget. So that's what they established. You cannot go higher than that rate.
Okay.
So that's, you could go below, but your threshold is their rate on the high end.
And so, I know one of the things was, people were saying, well, this is going to create a competitive disadvantage for businesses in the township, and you know, we're not going to sit here and say it's going to be a competitive advantage, but kind of looking at this list, law Arlington Heights, the city of Cincinnati, St. Bernard are all at 2.1%. Is that right, Chris?
Yes.
That's what I see here. Hamilton, Woodlawn, Amberley Village, Elmwood Place, Norwood, Cheviot are all at 2%. Gulf Manor is at 1.7%. And then Green Hills, Forest Park, Fairfield, Springdale, Sharonville, North College Hill, Mount Healthy are all at 1.5%. And the only two that are jurisdictions that are less is Evendale's 1.2%. And Wyoming is 0.8%, but they don't grant reciprocity to anybody. If you live in Wyoming, you pay their tax. You pay their tax, and if you work in the city of Cincinnati, you pay another 2.1% there.
Plus it's on dividends.
It's on income.
It's not just earning.
It's not earning. It's on all your tax. You know, interest, dividends, all income.
Plus they have a separate tax, I think, for school, there's a 0.25 or 0.35% for schools too.
Okay.
If you have that on, they're at 1.1%. Yeah, because they have tax for schools, it's income tax. They're one of the only ones, they are the only one that I know in the county.
And the income tax on the school, on the schools plus the government.
The government and the income, same income tax for the schools, so it's 0.8 plus 0.35.
Actually, it's not the city of.
Right.
And actually, it's the school district.
Right.
It's not one and the same, one of the school districts, a political entity in the city of.
So the 1.5 that we're proposing is at the lower end of the range of the jurisdictions around here. It looks like to me.
We know, since we've been having these meetings and there still continues to be some misinformation and some confusion about the whole business, hopefully there's a better understanding, as we continue to discuss what JEDZ is and what it is. I know I was in one of our stores, I was up in Brentwood, and a couple of people came up to me and they were very upset with the proposed JEDZ because they thought they were going to have to pay. Well, they're retired, so they don't have to pay. And somehow they had the misinformation that because they were residents, it was automatically was going to be something they'd have to pay. And then there was some confusion regarding, they thought we were only taxing our police and fire department, and that's not true. So I had to educate everyone, and I think these meetings are going to continue to be an educational format to help people understand this. For those individuals who are living and working in the township, but then we had the CIC, and if you work outside of the township, which I pay city tax, so I'm not charged the JEDZ because I work outside. So I think we need to do a better job of educating our community about the facts.
Well, Gwen, I think you're right. I will tell you, I've been in this community for 32 years and with a law practice, and so I meet a lot of people, and I can tell you more than one retired person come to me and say, our property taxes, I'm on, fixed income. I want to stay in my house, but I can't afford more taxes. And not all that's, and I can say, well, about, a quarter of it's the township, you got to look to the school district and the county and other places too, but that doesn't change what they're paying. And I think one of the reasons that as a board of trustees, we've looked at this JEDZ is because, as we presented in that PowerPoint, a week or two ago, at some point, the police department, the fire department, their levies will run out, as over time with inflation and salaries and expenses. Those levies, when they're passed, are fixed and they never change. And as the year we try and stretch them, these two guys over here, that our chiefs have done we usually say you guys got to get 5 years out of a levy or something, and they get 8, or whatever it is. They're always looking at ways to, operate the department safely, but at the, with the least possible expense they can. And but there will come a time when we're going to have to go back to the voters and say, we're going to need some more money if we're going to keep our safety services where they are. And for us to say, let's just, because the state's done this to us, let's just dump some more dump some more onto the property tax right now, I don't think is the right solution. It's not in the long-range best interest of the township.
Just to clarify, our levies don't run, I mean, they're continuing, but I think what you meant, I know what you meant.
They-
Specific, I mean, there is one fire levy that does expire.
Correct.
It was the last one, it was a 5-year, and that does expire. The rest will continue, but what happens is, as you know, your expenditures exceed your revenues, because for the most part, the levies are staying fixed. That's what they said.
They get to a place where you don't have enough money to pay for the bills.
You know, one of the things that we focus so heavily on the JEDS is that we've always known that the JEDS was for a piece of this equation. That's why when we met back in August and we looked at our situation and projected our budget, we said, well, okay, there's really 3 choices. I mean, really 2 choices. We cut or we expand our revenues. And then if you choose expanding revenues rather than further reductions, because I think we all know that we cut about as much as we can. When I say that, I don't mean we can't say 10,000 here or 15. We're going to constantly look to do that. I'm talking about millions of dollars worth of cuts. It's going to really impact services that we've done because we've already reduced 35%. So when we looked at that issue, the JEDS isn't designed to solve everything. You know, we have this thing we lost from the state, and we could have picked the 2%. We could have picked Cincinnati to JEDS with, and it would have brought in more revenue. That wasn't the intention. The intention is to continue the JEDS so that a portion of what admin does for economic development, as I said, to a degree, everything we do with economic development, but the specific functions and the staffing for admin, for police and fire and all the other departments. Admin's a piece of every department in the township. It doesn't do separate things, but one of the things it does do is economic development. The JEDS becomes that component because we want to do things specific towards business. They're going to bring in more clients for them, whether that's residential. That's largely our commercial base lives off of our residential base, and our residential base wants those services to be close, and that's why they moved here. So not entirely, but that's kind of where we're structured. But there are going to have to be maybe not new property tax, but renewals. And that's why we've recommended the consolidation levy. When police and fire get to that point, which is we talked about in our 5-year projections, it's probably somewhere between 3 and 5 years, that we consolidate and try to simplify some of these levies. And it might be possible if we start seeing some increased valuations that we can drop the millage amount by consolidation, by leveraging those dollars. That remains to be seen, and nobody has a crystal ball to know what's going to happen with real estate, but if those values return to where they were or start increasing again, there is the hope that maybe we can bring the total millage down. I'm trying to think, Chris, what's our total millage, about 23 mills? Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Of the township.
Yeah, for the township, maybe with a consolidation of police, fire, and roads, because infrastructure is an issue we haven't even touched on in any of these meetings. And we currently don't have enough funding to manage our infrastructure as it is today. So we have to do something. We've got ideas. It's not, JEDS isn't the one solution to all of our issues. It's the first step. And there still is 3 or 4 other things that have to happen. We still need to do shared service. We still need to consolidate some of our services. We have succession plans where we're trying to shrink staff, but not the service. And we're constantly working for innovative ways to do that. And I think we'll do those over the next 5, 7, 10 years. But there will be property taxes. I mean, it's just inevitable when 75% of your revenue comes from that source that you're going to have to renew it at some point. So I don't want anybody to think, boy, they just get the JEDS, all the problems are solved, and they're using that to plug in every problem they have. No, it's for a specific economic development purpose to keep this thing functioning, because the biggest crisis is in the general fund. That happens in 2016 is where we show the deficit. So it has to happen now, so we'll incur that deficit and spend down all of our carryovers to a point where we'll never recover. That's the difficult thing. Once you get to that point, you're looking at significant cuts. So just wanted to, the consolidation levy, whether the board chooses to do that, whether people choose to vote for it, I think it makes a lot of sense. We've talked about it once before, but at the very least, if you not to do that yet. In 17 or 18, we're going to have property tax issues on, even if they're just sort of renewals or replacement levies. And that probably renewal for fire for that piece, but replacement. And we've done that over the years, where we didn't change the millage amount, we just replaced.
And that's
kind of like what the zoo did. Like I said, it's not a tax increase, you're just saying, you're just trying to get the new appraised values
Right.
in place. That hasn't been a tool recently because we once had mills. One mill generated more than $5.99. At least from my recollection, I can remember once that one mill was higher than $5.99. I can remember when it was a lot lower. So we're starting to see a recovery in what those property values are. But this would be, 2 years ago, would be a terrible time, right? Because you've been doing it at the lowest point of what a mill would generate, dollars-wise. But there is going to have to be property tax, whether that's, let's say 3 to 5 years. We're going to continue to try to shrink and downsize the property create ways to do things. But that's, as you well know, that's the other piece of the plan. We just have ways to go for it. And everybody says, well, you're trying to go to generate your home. We know that. And that's one of the other components to that's in the plan.
And that's something we've said in the state of the township for the past, 5 years, or anyone in the audience tonight that's ever attended the state of the township meetings that we have annually, that's a lot of the information that we've shared, regarding the, whatever opportunities we have. We're not looking at focusing just on one type of methodology, we're looking at several. And at some point, it should balance itself out. So it's not new news, it's somewhat old news, but I think for those that attended the meetings.
Between your grant, between some point that the state returns local government funds, or gives us casino money, or finds some source that we don't even know about, I don't know that day is ever going to come, but if that happens, well, then it's a different, we'll have to adjust accordingly. And as you said, then maybe the JEDZ doesn't become, I think somebody called it a bridge. When the speaker said to discover bridge, and I didn't think of it that way, but it might be. Hopefully it is, because there's a different source that it comes to. I don't know what that is.
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who works in the township, has a business here, even though the master plan called for it a number of years ago, I always resisted it. I don't want it any more than I know we got business owners here in the room tonight. I didn't want this tax, but I can tell you, as a trustee, and if I have to look at the good of the whole township, I cannot. Some of the when we had the meeting last week, and a lot of people came up, and it was an opportunity for them to say, what's the solution? How do we fix this? And one person said, file bankruptcy. Just file bankruptcy. That's not a solution, not even remotely one. Somebody else said, well, you can have a township garage sale. Well, not to raise millions of dollars. Other people said economic development. Well, as Mike said, just with property taxes and only 1% of that going in the general fund, we could, if Google came here, we wouldn't probably raise enough money to fix our problem. So as much as I don't like this idea, I'm not sure that we have an option right now, given the hand we've been dealt by the legislature. But I think it's an important issue, and I appreciate everybody. This is a free country, and everybody can be for it or against it. I ask that everyone try and have an open mind to understand the facts. And one of the things that happened at our last meeting is there was a fair amount of misinformation that came out. And we're going to have to, because this is critical for the township, we're going to have to address those things. I know one of the things that was said is that we went to Columbus to argue that the law shouldn't be changed, that somehow what we were doing was illegal, and we were trying to argue against it. The fact of the matter is the exact opposite. We went to Columbus, and if you look at our testimony, we said, you guys have pulled the rug out from under local governments like us. Don't take away this one tool that exists. Two, you can't do all of it to us. And that was, all we were saying is don't change the laws that exist because what we're proposing is legal. And it was for that reason that we went to Columbus. And, there was one representative from a small eastern county who said, oh, I think this is, it's a tax grab. And, and by the same token, everything is a tax grab. We do, if you put another property tax on, is it going to be any different? And unfortunately, we are where we are because of things that have been done to us from outside. If the law was where it was, none of us would be in this room right now. There would be no, if the changes, the cuts hadn't been made. And it's a philosophical thing that our leaders in Columbus have decided to do. Today I went on the internet and I took a look at some of the things that, Governor Kasich's got a website where he talks about that significant tax reform means a $2.7 billion net tax cut to make Ohio more competitive, and they're going to reduce personal income tax rates over 10% over the next 3 years. And there's also going to be a 50% small business tax deduction on the first $250 of net income. And that, excuse what I said. That wouldn't be a very good cut, would it? No, the first $250,000, $250,000, the state for small businesses, if you are a shareholder in your company, the owner of the company, and you own more than 20% of the company, you're allowed to not pay tax on the first half of $250,000. Income tax rates in Ohio for income over, let's say you're making $250,000, income rates in Ohio for over $100,000, and this applies to W-2 income and all the net profits of a business, are 6%. And so that would be, this law, if you have a business that's making that amount of money, is going to save you $7,500. And it started last January, so it's going to be for this year. If we have to pass this JED, and you're making $250,000, the JED's going to cost you $3,750. With the two, you're going to end up, if you subtract one from the other, you're going to pay $3,800 less tax than you did in 2012. Now the state, they're doing some of these tax cuts on a national or on a state basis because they cut local governments, among other things. A few years ago, the state rainy day fund was at zero. Or as they like to say, I think they had $1.79 in it. And now they have $2 billion in there. We said, hey, can you give us some of our tax dollars back? And their answer is no way. We're going to do these cuts. So there are going to be other cuts that are going to impact small businesses. It would be nice if we could say, I wish you could get the whole, I wish I could, that I could say, I want to get the whole amount, have $7,500 tax break on my Ohio bill. But it's a trade-off, and there's been a decision made. We're gonna balance our budget of the state on the backs of local governments in part, and I know people, you don't want to hear it, but it's a reality. And I think there's a lot of energy and creative energy in this room and this group and people that are opposed to what we're stuck with doing. Maybe we ought to redirect some of that to our representatives and say, is this really good? Is tearing down local government really good for our state in the long run? And so I think the answer to that's no. And that's my 2 cents on some of the issues that we have here. It's not a perfect tax or a perfect solution by any means, but I think some of the things that have been proposed, let's incorporate. That's going to mean an income tax. That's what show me a city that doesn't have it, and they're few and far between. So,
And bankruptcy is not in my vocabulary, we just can't do that to our township.
well, I mean, that would be idiotic. You know, we would destroy our property values, everything we've worked for. You know, I've made this my home for 30-some years, and I like the area. It's a great area. We have great services from our police and fire and our road crew.
Yeah.
And people who say, we'll just cut it out, just cut it. Well, it's not going to be a great place when our kids don't have parks. It's not going to be a great place when we don't have the money to salt the roads or plow the roads. It's not going to be a great place when all the things that we have, that we need to be a good community and to move forward, when those are gone. We're a first-ring suburb, and this place, I mean, it became apparent to me back when I came on this board, not quite a few years ago, that there was two ways this place was going to go. One is kind of slippery slope down, and the other is we got to fight to, pull ourselves up and make it a good community. And I think this JED, as much as none of us are crazy about it, is something that we're going to have to do until we can hopefully find a better way to finance our government. And just because something happens doesn't mean it's forever. I mean, we've certainly seen that with things that can get enacted in Columbus and how legislative agendas can change. But I think there's been maybe a realization on the part of some of the representatives that they've created more havoc than they thought. While the one guy said, hey, I think this is a tax grab, another representative came up to us and said, we really screwed you people. And that's the fact of the matter. And they've done it not to us, but they've done it at every township, trustee I talk to, every village, official, mayors, everybody is, in a certain sense, we're all different. We all have a little different finances, but many of us are in almost the same boat. And I think there's going to be a backlash to some of this. And in the end, it's, whose money is it? It was our tax money. So, I'll tell you, I don't want to sit here and give a speech, but that's my take on it. I did, but
I think it's important that we continue to just provide the facts, and everybody, those that are watching and those that are here, please look at the facts, look at the data, and remember, we didn't create this train wreck. It was something that was created by our state legislators and our governor, and the only way we can get out of it is work together as a team to sustain our community and to sustain our township. And as we continue to be sustainable, then the economic development process continues to grow and move. So that's my take on it. I did a lot of soul searching and reading and listening. I looked at all my notes from the last few meetings we've had, and I had to stay focused on what the facts were. And that made things a lot clearer for me.
The other big win is the trustees aren't imposing this. All they're doing is putting on a ballot for
Yes.
residents to approve. I mean, that's all you're doing.
Exactly.
At the end, this is an issue that will be decided by the elector, not by us.
Right.
If we vote to put this on the ballot this evening, it'll ultimately be up to the people. And if they vote that, okay, we don't want to do a JED, maybe they approve it, maybe they don't. Then the next thing is, okay, then we got to look at a tax. You got to look at a tax, property tax levy. But given the makeup of our township and the fact that 30% of the entities in the township pay zero on property taxes, I'm not so sure that that's equitable. Say next, a huge employer, the Park District, a big employer. They have their county headquarters here in our township. They pay zero. And many other entities. So we have to kind of do what's fair for all. And I even understand the people. I sort of understand the people that say, well, I own a business here, but I don't live here, so I'm not going to get a vote on this. But You know, I can tell you, if we have a property tax increase, you're not gonna get a vote on that either. So I don't know how that's any different. Or, you know, if you go, you know, if I go to the city of Cincinnati and work, I don't get a vote on their taxes. But, you know, you get to pay them. So it's just the way our government, you know, the national government, the whole system is set up.
Joe, I would just, if I could just say one thing, you know, I've been here a long time, I was always chief, but I think to a certain degree, the board's been together a long time, and this has been the most difficult issue, just speaking personally. It's clearly been the most difficult issue, I think, other than maybe some of the personnel and some of the deaths we've encountered and things like that, but you know, as far as policy issue, I think this is clearly the most divisive, the most difficult. And it is frustrating because it's, as you said, it's not perfect, and it is an imperfect tax, and we're trying to get the information out. And I know that's what my role is. I don't have a vote here, and, you know, as the administrator, we're supposed to look at, you know, I'm supposed to provide expertise and advice to the board, and, you know, you don't always, you know, we've had, you know, it's not perfect advice all the time, but these are things I think we've looked at, as you said, for a long time. My point being is that, you know, over the course of this last 6 months, roughly 6 months that this process started, you know, there's been a lot of conversations with residents, people I've known for years. I just wanted to, you know, I've heard feedback maybe that I came off too strong, or looked angry, or wasn't as patient with people as I should have been. That's probably true in certain instances. And, you know, to those that are out there, I would apologize. If I've done that, and in the future, you know, as you said, Glenn, we're here to try to get the facts out. I'm not necessarily here to try to sway somebody. But if the facts don't do that, you know, that's what the individual's up to decide. That's what, you know, the administration will do, that's what our staff will do. We'll be willing to meet with individuals or groups of individuals to try to provide the information. I think it's gotten very personal, and that's unfortunate. Maybe I've contributed to that. And as I said, for that, I apologize if I've done that. And I know, you know, the board knows at times I'm very passionate on this community. And sometimes, you know, that gets the better of me. So, for what that's worth, I think it's a tough issue.
It's a tough
Your
issue.
apologies accepted.
Exactly.
No, and I'm the same way. There's times where it gets under your skin when you hear people saying stuff you don't think is right. But I think we do have a tradition here in Springfield Township of trying to talk, you know, of trying to reason with each other, to be rational. I respect people's opinions. You can disagree with me. Tell me why. If you've got the facts behind you, you know, I'll listen. But what I wish we could have heard is from somebody who said, there's a better way. Here's the solution. Here's what you do, trustees, and you can solve this problem. And I tell you, we've not heard that. And unfortunately, we've not heard it. And so I know, and there's going to be some of you probably never change your mind, but we're here to listen. And I apologize for any, you know, when, you know, I can get a hot head and say things I shouldn't say, and I apologize for that. But we wanted, this is just a tough thing we're going to have to get through, and I hope that, you know, regardless of what side we are on, we stick to the truth, and it'll end up being something that the voters will have to decide.
Well, you know, those who know me know that I don't do stress. I don't do stress even when we've been threatened up here. The last few meetings, there have been threats made against us, and I will not bend to any threat. I don't do stress. I stay strong, and I stick strictly with the facts. And sometimes people will say, well, you never seem to let anything bother you. Well, I don't, because I don't do stress. I want to stay focused on the facts at all times. If you were to look at one of my attributes, I think the most important thing from my perspective is to educate about the facts and not allow any emotions to redirect my process as I'm processing things at all. We're all passionate. Everybody in this room, and those who are viewing us, they're all passionate. We're all passionate about our township. I will fight for my township. I will do anything to keep our township the way, viable and sustainable. My kids live here, my grandkids live here, other family members live here. They live and they grow here. And one day I may say, I'm going to be downsized, but I'm going to downsize and stay in Springfield Township. And a lot of folks that I know have come to me and said, I want to stay in Springfield Township, and I'm going to stay in Springfield Township. So we want to be able to keep our community a sustainable community, a great community, because it is a great community. And one of the things I can say about my colleagues, we have always been fiscally conservative. We've always been so conservative in the way we manage as business partners this township. And that's another attribute that we have. And those of you who've been around for a while, you've heard of the feedback from other townships that say, you guys do a fabulous job. I wish we could operate in the same way. So we will get through this storm. We really will get through the storm. How we get through it will determine the outcome. But the most important thing is that we get through it and don't get stuck in the middle of misinformation. That's what I like to share from my perspective.
Can you teach me how not to do stress?
It took some time for me to get there.
I do. The only thing I'll add is, as a newbie, I'll just say, we're gonna put it in front of the voters. I don't know why you keep laughing when we say that, but that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put it in
Because
front
they
of the
didn't have
voters.
to say it.
We're gonna put it in front of the voters.
With that, then, does anybody else have anything they want to say?
I saw a calendar in my report, Joe. We had some long ones, but this.
Yeah, no, I think you're
Trustees take some of
I'm listening to it.
Is there anybody else that has anything to say?
No, I'm finished with that.
If that's the case, then let's move on to board resolutions. The first resolution we have this evening is resolution number 6, 2014. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Vernon?
Aye.
Mr. Garland?
Aye.
Mr. Honowell?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
All right.
I would like to see this
Wait.
identified with us.
Yeah, I didn't read the title. Let me read the title. It's a supplemental appropriation within State Law Enforcement Finance Fund 2906. And that's for Resolution 6, 2014.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Vernon?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Honowell?
Aye.
Carries again.
Next, we have Resolution number 7, 2014, which is approving a contract with the City of Mount Healthy to designate the Springfield Township Joint Economic Development Zone 1, directing the fiscal officer to file a copy of this resolution with the Hamilton County Board of Elections, directing the Hamilton County Board of Elections to submit the resolution to the electors of Springfield Township, dispensing with the second reading,
So moved.
Second.
and declaring an emergency.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Vernon?
Wait a minute, please.
Okay, you want to do this again?
Well, let's start over. I wanted to read the title of the resolution.
Okay.
Now, I think we need a motion to dispense with the requirement for 2 readings on 2 separate days. And this must be a roll call vote. So do we have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Vernon?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Honowell?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next, we need a motion to adopt Resolution 7, 2014 as an emergency resolution. Do we have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Vernon?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Honowell?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Finally, do we have a motion to adopt the resolution that I previously read, that being Resolution 7, 2014? And this motion is being, or no,
Burry? Aye. Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Arlo?
Aye.
The resolution carries.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burning. Next, moving on to old business. Do we have any old business before the board this evening?
The only old business I had was I was able to attend the meeting at the Finneytown High School about a week and a half ago, where there's a proposal by the governor to try to improve the education of our youth who are in high schools regarding drug abuse and how to avoid, how to say no to drugs, and also how to work through peer pressure. I thought the meeting was very interesting, and it was an excellent turnout from the residents in our community as well. So I thought, there's probably going to be more information coming on that, but I found it to be a very, very good meeting.
All right, thank you, Gwen. Is there any new business before the board this evening? New business, anyone?
I have none, sorry.
Next, we have citizens' participation. This is a portion of the meeting that if anyone wants to step forward, we would ask you to come up to the podium, state your name and address, and address the board. And I would ask that while that person's talking, that anyone else remain quiet so that we can hear what they have to say. Is there anyone here that wants to address the board this evening? Yes, Blossom.
Blossom Moore, 8987 Cotillion Drive, Cincinnati, 45231. Thomas Jefferson said that people are inherently capable of making the right decisions when they are properly informed. Now, it seems like in these 200 plus years since 1776, since he wrote the Declaration of Independence, we have made our governing extremely complicated. I see it on the local level, I see it on the state level and the federal level. We have invented all kinds of rules and regulations that often is very difficult to figure out what it all means. We need to hire lawyers to figure out how to do simple things. And it seems to me that perhaps we have to simplify things so that people can be properly informed. We have seen now with this JEDZ thing that there was a lot of different opinions about it based on different take on the information we had gotten, because it's so complicated to figure out what it really is. We need to simplify. To me, this JEDZ thing seems to be just another layer of taxing, because you're going to chase away this, some of the businesses, and it really doesn't do development. I've spoken to many employees here, for example, Brugers. Those girls are going to pay 1.5% because they don't live in the township, and that will be Christmas presents for the families. If they make $30,000, $40,000 a year, that's $450, maybe $600 a year. It's a lot of money for people who make little income. We don't have some fancy companies where people make lots of money, so it doesn't matter whether they pay or not. As for adding to our real estate tax, no way. We in this county, in Springfield Township, has the highest millage in the county, 23 mil. Indian Hill has 11 mil. Anything that you want to impose on us more will drive people away. My neighbors are telling me that they can't understand why are our real estate taxes so high, and that there are several of them said we are moving. Don't take Cincinnati as an example of good governing. Please, 3CDC is a bunch of scoundrels that would never make it on a free market. Everything they touch costs 10 to 15 times more than the free market would allow. They now own Washington Park and the Fountain Square. You might not know that. Their CEO makes more than $300,000 a year as supposedly non-profit organization. They're gentrifying the OTR and they're shipping the poor and dysfunctional people to Springfield Township, to Coleman Township, and everywhere else where you, police and firemen, will have to deal with them. So don't take Cincinnati. Cincinnati lost 40% of the population in the last 40 years because of their development ideas like stadiums, like all kinds of other boondoggles. So don't take anything that Cincinnati does. Forget about it. Streetcar. Forget about it. We are Springfield Township that has a very weird shape. It's more weird than, these congressional districts. And it seems to me it just doesn't make sense. I don't know what the history of it is that you get all these islands. And something maybe should be done. You should swap with Mount Healthy or swap with Wyoming or swap with Hartwell so that we get a sort of a community where this fire chief and this police chief doesn't have to go across through some other township to get places. Why should it be so difficult? I mean, it simplifies things. And another thing is that half a year ago I came to you with a proposal to help solve the $4 billion boondoggle that is happening right now with the so-called storm sewer overflow, where the rainwater is treated as a problem instead of as a resource that it is. Well, I requested the water bills and other utility bills so that I could figure out how much money we could save on the utilities by implementing some of those green ideas, collecting water and using it for flushing toilets and using it in the firehouse, that, as they are doing in Florida, from what the fire chief told me. We could become a trailblazer of sustainable community and decrease our utilities by becoming totally green. And set an example for the whole county so that they don't have to increase our water bills tenfold, which they are going to do in a few years. And your water bills have already doubled since 2000 because of this misconceived Sierra Club suit and then misconceived the consent decree. $4 billion, it's 4 times more than stadiums. And you know what happened with the stadiums. The commissioners speak about it, half of the meetings are always, what are we going to do with stadiums? Because of crazy contract that they made in which, they don't even, the Bengals owners and the Reds owners don't even cover the janitorial costs for those. I mean, it was corruption and cronyism, it was really horrible. Here we don't have that situation, and we could really become an enlightened, green community that will set an example of how to do things right, including the development. Why do churches don't pay? You say you have 30% of the area that nobody pays tax for, zero. But maybe you have to look into that. I know that churches in Cincinnati do pay some tax. I don't know how much, but they do pay real estate tax.
Just on where the resident or the priest lives, that's the same in all the county. So where the priest would live in the building, that section is taxed. The rest of is not.
Because it seems
That's the law. That's the state law.
that's the
the
same
same
law.
here.
So you cannot raise any tax from them.
No, you can't. Same with the.
Well, anyway, what I'm telling you, you cannot raise any more tax on the residents because they're going to leave just like they left Cincinnati. And please give me those data so that I can give you a proposal. I'll be going to India and China in March and April, and I would like to come up with a proposal that will show you the numbers, how we could save on at least at water bills.
Lost it, and to answer some of your questions, I mean, a lot of it is state law. We can't charge, property taxes aren't charged against the schools and churches because that's state law. Springfield Township looks like it does on the map because of state law, because Ohio's passed laws that say that municipalities can incorporate and take chunks out of townships with little disregard for what's left. And if we, if we went to some of our some of our neighbors and said, hey, we'll trade you, West College Hill for Edgemont, or, it's people that, the cities didn't pick those areas because they didn't want it.
Well, that's true.
I mean, I'm just kind of
And
joking.
that was changed the state law.
Well, in order for that to happen, Ross, the residents have to decide that. The landowners have to choose if they want to be in
Another.
North College Hill. There was one time where there was a mayor of North College Hill looking at West College Hill, but the residents of that area, the property owners, don't want it. They decide. They don't,
I was kind of joking with you when I was
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, but I'm saying-
We can't really trade these
you
areas.
can't trade it, but I mean, ultimately, it's not even our decision, it's the residents' decision where they want to be. And that's what happens in annexations.
But it affects your costs.
There's no question about that. I'm not arguing the problem that it causes. I'm saying the solution isn't as simple as just having a conversation and saying, how would you like to do it in these neighboring jurisdictions? They don't want it, and the neighboring jurisdiction doesn't want it. So that's, it's not something that's going to happen.
Well, the state law could be changed also, as you know.
Well, I think that's the lesson that's to be learned in all this, is that what happens in Columbus isn't some sort of, theoretical thing. It can come back and have dramatic, immediate impacts on our community. And so I think it's important that we make relationships with our elected officials and we start telling the story. Do you realize what you're doing to local governments? I mean, there was an article in the paper this past week. Dusty Rhodes wrote an editorial and he was talking about Ronald Reagan, who said the typical thing of government is to go to the local governments and to put more restrictions and more burdens on them without giving them any money. Here they've just taken our money away. But that's just the way that big government treats smaller government. But I think it's time, who's losing in this?
So we need revolution again,
Well, that's what Thomas Jefferson said. I think he thought there would be one about every, 20, 30 years or something like that. But, yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Patty Gardner, and I live at 8631 Cottonwood Drive. I've been in this Springfield Township for 58 years, and I've always thought it a great community to be. I'm actually very sad and disheartened at how many of our young kids, including my own, that don't want to stay in Springfield Township because it has declined, especially in the school district. It's kind of embarrassing that I go to work in Blue Ash every day and they all kind of rip on me about, Springfield Township was on the news again last night. What's going on over there? All of these things bother me. I don't want to leave Springfield Township either. I've been very fortunate and I think I can stay here primarily because for me it's still affordable. I know what it's like to live in Blue Ash, and I know what, I've looked at different areas, and even though I've always told people our taxes are higher here, but our housing is a little bit cheaper. If I took my house and moved it into the other community, it would cost twice as much for my house, so it's going to wash out in the long run. However, I really feel the way the economy is going, most people in Springfield Township are going to feel the reap from this because they're going to feel it when they go eat at Buffalo Wings and Rings. They're going to feel it at Bob Evans because all those people are going to have to put higher prices on their products. So everybody's going to feel it, every resident, whether they're not paying it or not. The other thing is, the schooling. That was the main thing that brought people to Springfield Township a long time ago. Unfortunately, I'm in Finneytown where the taxes are higher. Winton Woods and Forest Park, they don't pay the taxes that we do. that's been very disheartening to me as well, because we've been, and I've been the biggest proponent of telling everybody every year, we need to keep our property taxes higher. We need to keep good police and fire so people want to come here and keep it a nice community. But it's gotten to the point now where people are saying, where has it gotten me? We have terrible schools, our crime rate has gone up, which that happens everywhere. I try to, it's not just because of Springfield Township. They're having crime everywhere, but it is true what the lady said. Unfortunately, the city are pushing them right into our neighborhood. The drug society around here is unbelievable. And, what they do with the kids at school, I understand, where they're trying to help out the kids there with the drug programs. But we've been doing those for years, and we have worse problems now than we had when they started those 20 years ago. So I'm trying to be sympathetic on both sides. I don't like to pay the property taxes, but yet I like this area. But it's not going to be that same way for everybody. And I've seen a lot of people my age leave because of the area. So we do have to take both sides into consideration, but I think we need to go to Columbus, and I think we need to go to the federal level and tell them this is it. The buck stops here. Quit making these local governments come back to the taxpayers. They do it at every single level, and they know that people are going to say, well, it's going to decrease our fire and our safety. We're going to have to cut them back, and then that's going to be harder for us. They're always threatening us with those kind of things, and it's got to stop. The taxes, we're just being taxed to death. Everybody is at every single level. Yes, other areas do pay income tax or whatever, but they do have a lot more. Evendale, Sharonville, Wyoming. Sure, they do pay a lot more tax than we do, but they have a lot more to offer than we have here as well. I've been struggling to keep Brentwood Swim Club above water, and I'm having trouble with that. We have to think about this, and is there some way that we can get lobbyists to go to Columbus for us and tell them this is it? Our community's telling us, no, we do not want any more taxes. And what are we going to do if the JEDZ fails and the property tax fails? Then where will we be? So why don't we go to that? We should have that plan in mind right now, because I see what's going to happen is we're going to get a JEDZ tax, and then 2 years from now you're going to say, we don't have enough money from that, so now we do have to do property taxes.
Well, Patty, a couple things. I appreciate your comments. On the comment about a lobbyist to try and change some of this in Columbus, Springfield Township, along with Sycamore and other townships and cities in southwest Ohio, have hired a lobbyist to try to reverse some of these legislative decisions. And we're working with him to see if we can't make some changes in the law and get some of our tax dollars back and make these people in Columbus, these are their communities too, realize what they're doing. And so it's something that we are working on. It's become very apparent to me. And this, I remember this whole thing started, I think it was back in about 2008. We sat back in the Grove one night and Senator Bill Seitz, he said that the state budget is going to have a projected $8 billion deficit next year. He goes, the state of Ohio can't operate on a deficit. He goes, it's a train wreck coming down the tracks. And he looked at all of us and he said, a bunch of township people, and he said, it's all going to come and be dumped at your plates. And that's what happened.
They're not cutting at the top. We've seen that. They keep growing and growing up there while we keep peddling and trying to stay aboard. But that's what I'm saying. It's got to come to a point where we have got to stand up to our government and say, this is it. You cannot keep coming back to the communities, because that is our money, just like we said, it's unconstitutional, but that money's going there in the first place. So, I mean, you said we get like how much percentage back on our property taxes?
Well, there was a 10% rollback on existing levies, but, and one of the things which we didn't talk about a lot tonight is the state changed that too, and they said for any local levies in Ohio in the future that get voted in, we're not giving you local governments the 10% match. It's up to you, it's up to your residents to pay 100% of it.
Well, see, right, and that's what I'm saying, they just keep coming back to us. Is there any way, I mean, personally, it looks like the whole problem too is we need revenue. There's no doubt about it, we need revenue in Springfield Township. So why can't we go out and, I mean, you know, it doesn't take a big piece of property to find small entities to come in here. I mean, we already have a lot of vacancies in some of the shopping centers that we have. I mean, maybe we can incorporate some people to try to also help get businesses to come in here. But if we tell them that we're imposing a tax, that's gonna stifle that plan. I think that's why a lot of people came here in the first place.
And I understand that, and that's certainly something that I've always liked, the years that I've operated business here, that we don't have a local tax. And this tax is something that's gonna apply to all my employees, and I don't.
But that's why I came to a township, and I told my kids,
Exactly.
you move, you buy a house, buy it in a township. Because, you know, you are going to, and I totally understand, I wouldn't mind paying the 1%, and by the way, Blue Ash is only 1 1/4, and Montgomery's only 1%. But I understand, they have a lot more to offer as well.
They have a lot of business.
They do have a lot of business. But, you know what, so does Sycamore Township. Sycamore Township has a lot of business. It may not be as big of a township as ours, but I already hear, and I know a lot of people are complaining over there, and I think that was just thrown, I don't think that was talked about a lot. But I think...
They passed 4 JEDZ in Sycamore Township, and they're going to generate around $6 to $7 million.
Right. Well, and I totally understand. I mean, there's not just little business, and like here, we're already losing our mom and pop businesses. You know, there are hardly any left here now since P&T left and Angelo's, but I would like to know what we can do as residents we need to get through to Congress and to the state and how far up we have to go. We can't do this. I mean, the economy, people are out of jobs. There's just no way that everybody can afford to do this.
I think one of the things that we have to do is get the message out and educate our legislators on what the problem is.
Could you tell people who, you know, can you post that somewhere where we can get to people to tell them that?
Sure.
But, I mean, most people, I would be a proponent to do that, but a lot of people aren't into the political thing like I am. But nevertheless, it's still getting back to our area here. They're going to pay more money to go out to eat. They're going to pay more money, you know, to go to Kroger's. I mean, food has gotten outrageous before we throw taxes on people working there. So, in essence, the township residents are going to pay the 1.5% in one way or another. So, I wish there was another way. If there is, you know, I'm very anti-tax, so I really think we need to start looking at other avenues, and like I said, try to go to our representatives, which you don't see very often anymore. They're all hiding, and let them know we just can't sustain, we as residents cannot sustain these costs either.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Huffer, a little Pringle Drive. I just wanted to address Glenn as far as the threats. I want to know what you're referring to, the fact that we said that we would campaign against you or run against you?
No, that was not the threats, and then all you have to do is go back and look at the videos. It had nothing to do with that.
Okay. I mean, who was threatening you? I don't
All right.
know.
We're having a meeting, why don't we just go ahead and have the meeting? If you have something to say about what we were talking about here.
Okay, I'm just curious because, I mean, I kind of felt like that was directed at me.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, good. The other thing I want to say is, you know, you guys talk about, you know, stability and sticking to the facts and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, there's been people who have, you know, called people liars, said things behind other people's backs, and, you know, we're selling this thing with fear that we're going to have to cut police and fire. What about all that?
Is that
I don't
statement?
know, it's that statement.
You can address
It was a
the
question.
answer your questions.
I'm sorry?
Kyle, I think the best thing is for everybody to debate the facts, not to take this thing personal. I get the sense, and I will say, it can be, you know, it can go both ways, that, you know, emotions can get high over this, because I think the future of the township's riding on this to a certain extent. The long-range viability and the economic health of our township, and really the community, the value of our homes, the value of our businesses. I think a lot rides on this. We've got some real challenges. We're going to have to figure out a way to get through it. And so I think I can see, you know, from, you know, some of the people here that are out picketing, you know, I can see you got a lot of energy. You're really into opposing this, and I can understand.
We're trying to raise awareness of what's going on.
That's good, and so long as we all stick with the facts, I'm great, I'm all for that. But I can't let people, if people are going to say to me, state things that aren't true, then we're going to have to say that's not true, and we're going to have to call it, you know, say this is what the truth is. So that's the only thing. But you're right, I don't want to have personal attacks. I don't want to have, you know, things of that nature. We're better off if we can all be adults and talk about this in a rational, logical manner.
I think you need to have that discussion with your staff as well.
All right, thank you.
The other thing I wanted to mention too is you compared Springfield Township to all these other communities as far as the tax rates and that sort of thing. What you're not taking into consideration there is their property taxes are a lot lower than what ours are. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening?
Sherry Stephen, I live on Gilcrest Drive. Just wanted to share some additional information on the JEDZ proposal. You've discussed in numerous presentations over the past several months the Community Improvement Corporation, otherwise known as the CIC, and described it as a way to make residents who are subject to the tax whole by providing them a rebate on the taxes that they pay in. You know, all the records will clearly show that the CIC was not part of the original contract. It was added, you know, partway through with some of the contract revisions. So, you know, clearly the real reason that the CIC was implemented was to exempt yourselves and other potential voters from the JEDZ tax. You've repeatedly stated how you are against the JEDZ tax and how you don't like paying it either. You know, it's, you know, clearly it's certainly a novel scheme that fully exempts you from paying the tax by providing for a complete rebate. You know, if the JEDZ is so good and so necessary for the township, as you claim, then it seems to me that you would, you know, as a township leader, probably be first in line to pay the tax and not grant yourself a rebate. It just certainly seems like a veiled rebate scheme so that you don't have to pay it, as well as a lot of the other township staff. The JEDZ effectively creates a 40-year tax, renewable for up to another 30 years. In total, this takes more than $78 million out of the cash registers of businesses and out of the pockets of hardworking employees, including our dedicated firemen and policemen. You've talked many times that you can't accurately plan even a 5-year budget for the township. Yet you propose to know that a 70-year tax is right. And again, I personally find this incredibly inconsistent and very troubling. The pending legislation at the state level, which we've talked about tonight, so it's House Bill 289, would restrict what you're trying to do. House Bill 289 would require that a JEDZ be approved by 51% of the businesses that are affected. And that would ensure that those business owners that are being taxed have representation. In this case, you're trying to ram the JEDZ through before House Bill 289 can be approved. In fact, the term of the proposal for JEDZ was even increased from the original proposal, now renewable up to 70 years, so that once it's voted in place, it cannot be changed, even if there's different legislation at the state level. And frankly, we've hired a very expensive lobbyist using our tax dollars to represent the township, but in many respects to work against some of us who believe that the JEDZ is not right. As you know, I'm only a resident. I am not a business owner. I'm not an employee working in the township, and I won't pay this tax. So you could say, I don't have a dog in this fight, but that's not true. I really believe in Springfield Township. I want to live in a community that provides a lot of, has a strong residential and small business base for the future. And I believe that what you're doing is morally and ethically wrong, and it will irreparably damage the township and all those who live and work here by continuing to drive business out. Again, because of the excessively high tax burden that we already have. Most people between property tax, federal tax, state income, state tax, local tax, sales tax, and now with the JEDZ, that's going to put most people over a 40% tax bracket. So in terms of looking, in a year from call it January to December, it's probably January till May or June before they have their tax obligations paid, simply because they're living in Springfield Township. What I'd ask you to do is carefully consider your vote tonight as you represent the people who elected you, and because there have been overwhelming opposition. I had hoped that at least 2 of the trustees would vote no, leaving 1 person to represent those who are in full right of their opinion who do support the JEDZ. But I truly felt that a 2-to-1 vote would have been much more representative of your duties to represent the people. Thank you.
Yes.
As to the contract, there's reference that the grant isn't supposed to be made, but there's a grant is in the contract. That is nowhere in the contract. The way that came about was actually a member of your group suggested that be done. It is still today not in the contract. That's not correct. And the basis for that, you're making it sound like somehow we just did this in a shady manner, which we didn't. A member of your group said it's not fair that the residents pay this tax in addition to property taxes. Look at what Sycamore did. The board then directed staff and me to look at what Sycamore did and to see if it was A, lawful, B, possible to be done in Springfield Township. So that's what we did. We looked at, okay, Sycamore's giving a grant to the people who live and work in their township for the same reasons that the member of your group raised, is that it seems inequitable to have the person who's paying for the property tax, shouldering most of the burden, also pay for the JEDZ tax. So we looked at that. At that point, we proposed that as being something that the board was going to do. It is not in the contract to this day. It is something the board has said they will do, and that's what we are being taxed with creating a CNC to do. It also is a grant. It is not a rebate. It's a grant. People must apply for it. So it is possible that board members won't apply for it. People can decide that they don't want the money back and not apply for it, or decide that it's not worth it. And for some people, they may only pay $50. And they'll say, I'm not going to go through a grant application for $50. And I think the township should just get the $50. So it is not an automatic rebate. It is not a non-payment by residents. It's a grant. And people can make their own decisions whether they want to apply for that grant when it becomes becomes available. So it's not in the contract now.